fights with passion, and he inspires.
Are you ready for a war?
All right, welcome back to From A to Arbitration. Let me start this episode off by sending my condolences to our brothers and sisters in Chicago who lost a young lady, a sister carrier, that was murdered on her route, Miss Octavia Redmond. And talked today in the Zoom meeting, Mr. Cariff talked about that. Also saw their president on social media talking about it. And it's always tragic when we lose one of our own, especially in this environment when we're getting murdered on the street. I don't know the details of it. I just know that she was delivering mail and someone drove up and murdered her. And so completely tragic. And so I want to start this episode off by sending my condolences to our brothers and sisters in Chicago and as well as her family. And just know that I'll be praying for y'all down here in Nashville. And hopefully those of y'all who pray will be praying for our brothers and sisters up there that work beside that young sister. That's completely tragic, completely tragic. A lot of people had messaged me about that. And unfortunately, I saw where that had happened. So be praying for y'all in Chicago, okay? I love each and every one of you, and that is absolutely tragic. Today's episode, I have talked with Mr. Charlie Miller, and he was the TA for Mr. Jackson in the charges against Mr. Renfroe. A very interesting conversation. He'll be talking about the appeals process, appealing the 4 charges to the convention. I read each appeal. It's about 2 hours long. I read each appeal. We talk about it. He's obviously the party that's appealing those charges, where the executive council dropped the ball on that. And so that's what today's episode will be. It'll be talking with Mr. Charlie Miller, who is one of the greatest advocates we've had in arbitration as far as the NALC is concerned. He's been around the block a time or two, a very intelligent individual. And so he's also part of the CLC. I've come to love that man through our talks over the past few months. But back when, y'all remember when I was challenging the executive council, I said, any of y'all want to come on here and defend yourself. It's indefensible what you did, but if you want to come on here and talk about it, I'd love to hear it. Of course, Mr. Vafiedes, he was the very first one. I think it was the next day. He sent me a message saying, hey, come on, I want to talk about it. And so he actually came on and talked about it. I told you that I've reached out to Mr. Weiner, who continued to email me after I read the panel report and Mr. Jackson's rebuttal. He was emailing. I said, hey, enough of the emails. Come on here and talk about it. So far, he hasn't. None of the other executive council has. Mr. Charlie Miller was talking about it. I said, you come on here and talk about it. And he said, get me a spot. So he wanted to be heard. And so I gave that same opportunity to everybody. Everybody. And y'all have heard me on this podcast. Nobody can say that they've reached out to me and I didn't respond to their wanting to come on here. That will not happen. If you want to come on here, I'll let you on here. But I asked Charlie to come on, and he did. And so that's going to be, I'll have that at the end of this episode where I'm talking here, okay? We also had the Zoom meeting for Bill to Fighting NALC. That was today. I'm extremely encouraged by that movement. Like we were talking about, it's sad that you have to have a movement called Building a Fighting NALC. That's unfortunate. I'm glad they're doing it, but damn, who would have ever thought that we'd have to get a movement called Build a Fighting NALC? Who would have ever thought that our union has fallen that far as representation, as far as educating, as far as defending? But we have. Here we are. Because I was on a Zoom meeting today with the group, Build a Fighting NALC. And so we talked about the convention, what they're going to do at the convention, as far as the proposals, open bargaining. We talked about those things. JB will be on tomorrow, and he's going to talk about LWOP to AWOL. That's a very important one for me because I get so many questions about it. That's kind of rampant right now. So he's going to come on and do that for me. Next Sunday, I'm going to talk about the convention and what to expect. This call for the question. I'll talk about all those things and other things like we're going to have a podcast today when we're at the convention. Some people are bringing some equipment so we can do that. Who's going to have special meeting rooms? I know that Building and Fighting NALC is going to have a room. The CLC is going to have a room. We got Shirt Day. We'll talk about that in a minute. But a lot of things going on at the convention. It's going to be a full week. And so that will be very exciting. I'll do that next Sunday. I believe Tyler's going to come back on midweek that next week and talk. I'll let him talk about whatever he wants to talk about. Getting ready for the convention, right? So all these things that we've been doing are kind of getting ready for the convention. And so then after the convention, I'm going to have Mr. James Henry, who is the one that the CLC has chosen to be the president. I'll have Mr. Cariff back on to answer questions. I'll have Mr. Noble back on to answer questions. And so, man, we're going to be full up for a little bit. We're going to be full up for a while. The CLC has a Facebook page now. If you want to get on there, they also have a website, concernedlettercarriers.com. And so they've got a new social media person, and he's getting all these things ramped up. And so after the convention, I would look for that to go full speed ahead. The CLC, kind of getting their feet up underneath them right now. I know a lot of people are having issues saying transparency and all this other fucking shit, but, it's a brand new movement, just like Building and Fighting NALC. And so they're getting their feet underneath them and have now gotten a social media person. And I believe after the convention, you're going to see a lot more stuff about the CLC come out, right? So with that, let's get through with a couple of things, and I'm going to get you to Charlie Miller. Remember the 50-50 raffle, okay? Don't forget about that. The 50-50 raffle, when you get on ForMadeArbitration.com, it will be on there where you can pay by Zelle to get these tickets. All proceeds go to benefit MDA. The drawing will be Friday, August 9th, 2024 at the convention. Only 5,000 tickets available. That was 3 weeks ago. So no telling how many tickets are available now. $12,500 prize if all the tickets are sold. $5 each ticket. And like I said, Zelle will be accepted until July 31st, and it'll have that where you can scan that to pay by Zelle. Get on ForMadeArbitration.com and get you some tickets. Whether it's 3, 4, 5 tickets, get you some tickets. They're $5 a piece. Let's do something big for this raffle. That's a huge goal, 5,000 tickets. That's a lot of money going to MDA, right? So let's do that. Also, the shirt sales have gone crazy, and I cannot thank y'all enough, but it's wild how many shirts we have sold for the convention. And the convention shirts are straight money. I mean, they look good. And so I appreciate everybody that has their hand in that. I don't have anything to do with it. The design, the makeup, anything like that, I have nothing to do with that. Somebody else does it, and they do a fantastic job. And so the shirt sales have gone nuts. So I think it may be too late to get a shirt, but you got 2 weeks. I don't know. Maybe I'll try to get one anyway. But they've done so well, that's encouraging. All of those proceeds will go to MDA as well. Okay? So I appreciate anybody who got a shirt. I appreciate it. Now, the shirt day will be that Thursday. It will not be Wednesday. I saw somebody on social media said that Wednesday will be a veteran shirt day. I'm not going to interrupt that or interfere with that. I know better than that. My dad's a veteran. So I'm not going to do that. And we'll make it Thursday. Now, every day has a designated shirt day, whether it's the regional day, the political action fund, veterans. So I'm not going to interfere with veterans. I'll interfere with something else, but because too many people reached out about having a shirt day. And so that will be Thursday. All right. It will not be another day. Now you can wear them every day you want. You can wear them Monday through Friday if you want to, but I'm saying that Thursday will be that. There's usually a place where you can get pictures with the branch. Maybe we can all meet there during a break and get a picture with everybody. I would love that, to put that up on Facebook, my Facebook page and whatever else, a picture with everybody that wore the shirts. That would be absolutely awesome. People have asked if we're going to have a meet and greet. I'm not sure yet. I may go to the CLC room. If everybody wants to meet there, we can all just meet there and introduce ourselves. I know Discord and Reddit, those people that are coming are wanting to kind of meet each other that have been talking shit to each other all year. So you can put a face with a name. And so we may do that, but I will announce that next week when I talk about the convention. All these details will be separated and dealt with on there, okay? So we've got that. Make sure you get on Reddit and make sure you get on Discord. Okay, those things are doing really well, and there's so much grievance help on those things. It's really encouraging. You look and if somebody asks a question about a specific grievance, you see 50 comments helping out, and that's what it's all about. That's what From 8 Arbitration is all about. until we got sidetracked a little bit and got on some other things. It was funny. Somebody had told me the other day that they were talking to an individual that no longer listens to me because they said that I was, what was that they called me? I was a hypocrite. That's what they called me. Said I was a hypocrite because when I came out, I said I was not going to be political and I was not going to run for anything. And here I am, all political, and I'm running for something. So I guess you could say I'm hypocritical. What I won't do, though, is tell y'all to fight, tell y'all to get into the arena, tell y'all to get on the field, tell y'all to get into the ring and fight these motherfuckers. I'm not going to tell y'all to do that and sit in the stands and cheer for you. And so I've decided on here over these past few years when I saw how things were going with my union, I decided that I would, in fact, run for something, NBA, because I want to make a difference and a change. I'm not going to leave my tenure with the post office in this union with my union being in such disarray as it is right now. It is a joke. My union right now is a joke. The NALC is a joke. They're not doing what it's designed to do. They're not doing those things. Hence the CLC. Hence Mike Weir stepping up, talking about he's going to run. It's because we have a lack of leadership in this union. Renfroe and Barner have destroyed what the NALC stands for, and that's to represent our brothers and sisters. And so, yes, I'm a hypocrite. I'll give you that. But I'm not going to tell y'all to fight, and my ass ain't going to be in there fighting. And I will fight anybody and everybody for my city letter carriers, whether it's management or it's my union. And I think I've proven that. By the way, I cuss out both sides, and I will continue to do that until this ship gets righted. And it's going to happen. Like I said, the CLC is going to take over this union, and you're going to have some lions take back over this shit. And you heard me talking the other day. You know, you've got your president, Mr. Henry, who's going to be in charge, but he's going to surround himself with those lions that are going to devour everything in their path when it comes to fucking with city letter carriers. Whoever's doing that will be devoured. And that's a promise from me to you. So I can't wait. Unfortunately, I've got 2 years to wait. And so a lot of damage can be done within 2 years, and it's being done now. You know that we're on day 427 of having no agreement, no contract. Day 427. That is unbelievable. That is unbelievable. I would have never thought that I would have heard that. I can't believe it. Do you know 20 weeks ago we picked a neutral arbitrator? 20 weeks ago we picked a neutral arbitrator. You pick a neutral arbitrator because you're at an impasse. You've done everything that you can do. You've met as much as you can meet. Now, I know they always say we're still in negotiations afterwards, but what you do when you pick a neutral arbitrator, as you said, the things that we can agree on, we've agreed on them. The things that we can't agree on, we're in too much of a divide right here. So we're going to pick a neutral arbitrator. Let's set a date for arbitration. Let's go to arbitration. We can still continue to talk. We can still continue to go to these hotel rooms and meet for a week. We can still do those things during arbitration. They've not set a date yet. 427 days after our agreement has expired, 20 weeks after the neutral arbitrator has been picked, no date set, and we're still faltering. You will have those that will defend that shit. You will have those that will defend those actions. This is how it always is. This is not how it always is. If you're continuing to say that, you're ignorant. You're ignorant of what's going on. And so we're in a bad way. We're in a bad way right now. We have people that are greatly underpaid. We have individuals making fast food wages that work for the Postal Service. Think about that. When I first started, and I've talked about this before, when I first started, when you told somebody you worked for the post office, man, they thought you were rich. You had it made with the benefits and the retirement and your hourly rate. You were rich. That's the union part of it, right? That's the union part of the Postal Service, is that the union had fought for those accelerated wages, those wages that make other like companies envious. We have individuals starting right now that have no representation, and they make fast food wages. That would be upsetting to me if I'm the president of this union. That would be upsetting to me, but yet it has lasted several contracts. That's still the case. The CCA position needs to be abolished. They need to make those individuals full-time immediately and hire in as full-time. From now on, hire in as full-time. The CCA position has run its course. What good it was for us at the time that it was incorporated into our agreement. The CCA craft has run its course. They need to be done away with. Make the CCAs now full-time. Pay them accordingly. Do away with the CCA position and hire in straight full-time. If that doesn't happen, we should not ratify this vote. We should not vote on this contract to be approved. That's how I feel. It's that important. And CCAs, y'all need to get a movement amongst yourselves. Y'all need to start talking amongst yourselves. And if your union, as is, doesn't support that, vote them out and vote those in that will put y'all first. And understand that the ones that are being aggrieved the most is the CCA position. Fast food wages, no representation. Who in the fuck wants that? Who wants to come work for that? But yet we'll ask y'all to, and then we'll ask y'all to join the union when you first come in. We can't represent you because of how the contract is, and it's been that way for several contracts now. We can't represent you. Whoever thought of that is a fucking moron. Arbitrator or us or them. Whoever thought of not representing anybody who's employed with a city letter carrier craft is ignorant. I've said that before. If you're a city letter carrier in any capacity, you should have the right to representation. That's just the way I feel. So say 90 days, 3 months, and they can get rid of you without cause. They can just come in there and say, hey, I don't like you because of what you wear, because of what you look like, because of your skin color. Bump, you're gone. Did we not think about that? And it's been going on for several contracts now. The wages that y'all make are embarrassing. Embarrassing. So CCAs, I challenge you. If the union fails you and does not do away with a CCA position and bump y'all's pay dramatically, start you a movement. You can sway this vote, I'm telling you. Now, I've already believed, and a lot of people don't believe me, but I already believe that it's going to be overwhelming against Mr. Renfroe and those executive council members that suck his ass. I think it's going to be overwhelming. They're going to be defeated overwhelmingly, and that's just how I feel based on what I see. But CCAs, y'all communicate. Get you a Facebook page. Do something to organize yourselves and change this vote and change y'all's direction. You can do that. There are a lot of y'all. There's a lot of CCAs. Y'all can do that, right? I would challenge you to do that. There's a lot of, I want to address some podcasts. I try to do that every week, and I get off track, and so I don't. But I like to address the other podcasts that are out there, because I've always said if you've got one, I want to be able to put carriers onto y'all's podcast. to make them aware of other podcasts. I shouldn't be the only one, and I'm not. I think there should be many more. I think every region should have their own podcast. They're so afraid of management listening, and we may get some tips. I don't concern myself. I know management listens to me. Every time I go to an arbitration or I talk with somebody from labor, they listen to my podcast. I've had arbitrators, several, tell me that they listen to my podcast. Labor listens. Management listens. JB tells all the time when he go talking to a manager, they talk about listening to him on the podcast and listen to the podcast. I don't concern myself with that. I'm going to educate city letter carriers as much as I can. I'm railing on my union right now because I feel like they're not representing us like they should. I'll constantly rail on management because they're the most dishonest organization in the country as far as management's concerned. I think they're the most dishonest management organization in the country of any company. I think postal management is the most low-down, dishonest, unethical group there is. That's postal management. And I'll tell that to anybody. If I'm ever on any other show talking to newspapers, I will tell them that. And it's just a fact that they're that dishonest. And so, but we got some good podcasts out there. You got Fed Up with Ron Speakman. Y'all heard him the other week. He was on here with me. We had a great time talking to each other. You got Classes of Mail with Alan Gigax. Now, if y'all have not listened to him, he's got a fantastic voice for podcasts. And he's extremely intelligent, very bright individual, and does some fantastic education. So Classes of Mail with Alan Gigax. Make sure you're listening to that one, okay? He does a very good job. On the Workroom Floor is a new podcast. That's got Cole Billups, who helps me all the time. I wouldn't be able to have done half my episodes if it wasn't for Cole Billups. And Elliot Simmons is on there with him. And they do a fantastic job of training, right? You've got United We Scan. That's the Rural Carrier podcast, if y'all want to listen to another Crass podcast. You also got a YouTube channel, The Angry Mailman, and I watch him all the time. He does some great stuff as well. So if you want to get on YouTube and look up The Angry Mailman, check him out. He does a lot of great stuff. So there's a lot of podcasts coming up, and I wish there was 100 times more. I think that there should be many, many more trying to educate our brothers and sisters. Going back to building a fighting NALC, they have a GoFundMe up. They've gotten a huge room in Boston at the convention center, and it costs a bit of money. They're a relatively new movement, right? I put those links up on Reddit, Discord, and my Facebook page. And so if y'all go to those, chip in what you can, $5, a couple of dollars. Just chip in what you can. It's a GoFundMe for Build a Fighting NALC so that they can get that room, so that people can go in there, introduce themselves, talk to them, see that movement. The CLC also has a room, and I'll be talking about all that next week as well. I got all this shit written down, so I'm going all over the place. So you have to forgive me. I want to read something to you that an individual sent me, and it's talking about these geotabs being put into our vehicles. And a lot of people have reached out to me about these geotabs, right? They're coming out, putting these things in the vehicles. A lot of people saying they take pictures, they take voice recordings, they can hear what you're saying on in your vehicle. And so somebody reached out to me that works at the VMF. I'm not going to say where. He has to remain anonymous, and that's exactly what's going to happen. But he broke it down for me, and I wanted to read this to y'all so that y'all are made aware of it, okay? He says, this is in regards to your recent response to the questions about the trackers being installed in the vehicles. These are called geotabs, and they have been in the FFV, Metris, ProMaster, and staff cars, as well as any other vehicle the Postal Service owns, with the exception of the LLV, for over a year. They connect to the OBD2 port, and the only reason the LLV took so long is because they had to custom build a special harness for it, as it's too old to have an OBD2 port. They just released the LLV harness, and that is why there is currently a push to get them installed. The main reason these are being installed is because of our new computer program that is being used by vehicle maintenance called FMIS. FMIS is also changing the frequencies of the preventative maintenance on the vehicles and is a complete clusterfuck like everything else postal management touches. These vehicles are going to be in even worse condition and more unsafe than they already are. We have been using this program for roughly 3 months and now have about a week backlog to get anything to the shop and even longer to get it actually in a bay to get worked on. 6 months ago, we had less than a 2-day turnaround for 95% of the vehicles coming into the shop. And now they sit in the shop basically untouched for days because everyone is out trying to fix vehicles broken down on the side of the road. We've basically been instructed to not to fix anything until it's broken. This is part of a nationwide push to save 10%, quote unquote. These geotabs use GPS to track how long the vehicle has been driven between maintenances, as it is now a mileage rather than time-based system. Depending on the vehicle and what the vehicle computer will share with us, it can also be used to help diagnose potential issues remotely, as well as notifies us of potential problems such as the vehicle running too hot. I've also heard that they will send excessive speed notifications to the owning VMF manager. I do not currently know what that speed is, if it's location-based, meaning that the alerts may change depending on the particular road being driven on, or anything else related to the excessive speed notifications. I actually had my supervisor tell me just a couple of days ago that they were notified that one of these station staff cars was driving at 91 miles per hour. They will notify us if the vehicle has been involved in an accident, as well as help us locate lost vehicles, which happens more than you'd think. LOVs only track and transmit the GPS data and if the vehicle is on or off. Their ancient computers do not have the capability to monitor anything else. These devices do not have, nor will ever have, any video, picture, or sound recording capabilities. Those rumors have absolutely no basis and is impossible without hardware changes. The only thing that the carriers need to worry about is the GPS, which is already tracked by the scanner. At Stewart College last year, my MBA stated that they were promised that they couldn't be used for disciplinary purposes, but as you've highlighted on the podcast, I don't know if I can trust them. Local management, MPOs, or POOMs as you call them, nor anyone else at a district or area level do not have access to any of this information at this time, and I have heard of no plans to give them that access. Only VMF management has access, and VMF employees are considered headquarters employees, meaning they are not part of the typical area district structure and do not have to comply with district area management orders. If supervisors do request that information, I'm unsure if VMF will or even can share anything beyond where the vehicle is currently located. The only concern I have at the moment is that it could be a secondary data set that management could use to attempt to prove a stationary event. I have not heard of it being an issue, but knowing management, I could foresee it in the future. In everything but the LLV and FFV, it can technically tell us if the seatbelt is connected or not. They could also technically use them to see if a carrier has excessive hard acceleration or braking habits, speeding up, wear and tear on the vehicle, and everything but the LLV. So there's that kind of answers questions about the geotab that a lot of people have that are contacting me about that, okay? So I just wanted to read that to you. So that's been kind of 30 minutes of a hodgepodge of things that I was writing down, because today is about Charlie Miller and tomorrow will be about JB, but I wanted to get just those few things out there that I've not been touching on lately, and wanted to get those out there. Like I said, next week we'll be talking about the convention, and that will be a sight to behold. It's been told to me, and it's been told to quite a few people, that the Executive Council and Renfroe is not looking forward to this convention, and understandably so. The chickens are coming home to roost, as you would say, and they're coming home to roost on them at every level. they should be held accountable. And they're fixing to be. Business agents, the executive council as is, they're going to be held accountable. And I hope and pray that it all comes out in Boston. I really do. I know that those mics that are going to be on the floor are going to be hot. They're going to be hot from people going up there and challenging this administration. And they should be challenged. I've heard of business agents telling their carriers that it's none of their business how they voted. And I think I talked about this a few episodes ago. Could you imagine telling somebody that you work for that it's none of their business what they do? Because they work for us. We pay their salaries. They work for us. To tell me that you don't owe me an explanation on how you voted? Their time is coming. Boston, if you can get there, get there. Shit's going down in Boston. You talk about the lines coming. You got this bill to fighting NALC. They are not half-steppers. They're going to be up on those mics challenging this administration, and they should. I challenge this administration every week. Every week I challenge this administration because they're trifling and they're worthless. Renfroe is trifling and worthless. Barner, trifling and worthless. Those that support him on the executive council are the same. Those that have voted to protect this bastard are the same to me. And they will be held accountable. I promise you that. I'll be talking more about that next Sunday, okay? So, with all that being said, the real reason for this episode is Mr. Charlie Miller. And Mr. Miller, like I said, reached out to me about coming on here to talk about these charges. I said that I asked anybody and everybody who voted in support of Renfroe to come on here. And let's talk about it. I think that Renfroe's the biggest piece of shit we've ever had as a president. And I can back that up with things that I'm not just saying that. I can back that up with evidence when you're talking about stationary events. His piss poor position on that, this hip training, I can back that up with his piss poor position on that. All of these things, putting these things in the memos that old timers are saying it should have never been on. They understand the ignorance of that, putting those things on memos. That shows someone with inexperience as far as being on this floor, and that's catastrophic to us. I think he's by far the most incompetent president we've ever had. I see presidents, there's a vice president out west that came to his defense. You cannot tell me one good thing that Renfroe has done. You cannot pinpoint one good thing that Renfroe has done since he's been in office. I challenge anybody to do that. Pinpoint one good thing that he's done. They say, well, he comes and answers questions. He's supposed to do that. He's required to do that. Right? Well, he beat alcoholism. That's not a job requirement. You know, to beat alcoholism. That's not a job requirement. So I challenge anybody to tell me one good thing that he's done. I can show you numerous things that he's done that has put my carriers in jeopardy in a tragic way. I can show you numerous things. So I asked those individuals, come on here. Whoever voted for this motherfucker, come on here and explain yourself, right? Only Mr. Vafietes has done that. Nobody else has done it. None of these other cowardly motherfuckers on this executive council have said they're going to come on here and defend themselves. Now, they don't have to do that. You know, I'm nobody. I'm going to be delivering mail tomorrow. You know, I was delivering mail yesterday. I delivered mail, all last week in 100-degree heat. And so, I'm a city letter carrier. Nobody owes me an explanation. But I asked the cowardly motherfuckers to come on here and explain themselves why they felt that they should protect this bastard that we have as president. And nobody would do it except Mr. Vafietes. I asked Mr. Miller, and he immediately wanted to come on. And so this is what you're fixing to hear. These are the 4 appeals. The charges are going to be appealed to national, the convention, right? I'm going to read each one. It's very long. Like I said, it's 2 hours long. I'm going to read each one, and then we're going to talk about them, okay? So I think it'll be interesting to y'all. These are things that y'all probably wouldn't be privy to if it wasn't for this podcast, right? I don't think that y'all would be privy to the charges. First off, the Weir report, y'all would have probably never known of that. They wanted that covered up. You wouldn't have known about the panel report. You wouldn't have known about the rebuttal. Now you have business agents getting on there. Why they chose to protect this sorry-ass bastard. And now you got Mr. Miller, who was adamantly going after Mr. Renfroe and how he's mishandled his position as president, as a TA for Mr. Jackson, right? And so for the next 2 hours, you're going to get a taste of Charlie Miller, who's a good friend of mine. And we've become very close over the last few months, as far as he's part of the CLC, matter of fact. And we've talked a lot, and I've grown to love this man. His passion for the city letter carriers, you can tell it instantly. He's got a passion for the city letter carrier. Still does arbitrations to this day. He's still in that arena fighting. And so here you go, my discussion with Mr. Charlie Miller. I hope you enjoy it. I will not be back on the other side of it, so when that's over, we're done. I'll see y'all tomorrow with JB. And the next Sunday with the stuff about the convention, all right? I love y'all very much. I thank y'all very much for listening. Every week I do. I thank you very much for listening. Our numbers are growing by leaps and bounds, and that's because of y'all telling people to listen. And I know that I lose some people because of my language. I can't fucking help it. I try, but it just fucking comes out. And so, but we're gaining a lot of new listeners, and that's because of y'all, and I cannot thank you enough, right? It's a movement that nobody ever expected, but we needed. And it's here now, and we're not going anywhere. And so I'll see y'all tomorrow night with JB. So next, Mr. Charlie Miller. Enjoy. Bye. All right. As promised, I got Mr. Charlie Miller on with me. Charlie and I, we have become close friends over the last few months, kind of through this podcast. They've reached out, and we have done a lot of communicating back and forth on the same page as far as where we want this union to be. I'm going to let Charlie introduce himself, kind of his history with the NALC, a very powerful individual as far as the NALC is concerned, the things that he's done with the NALC. And like I said, he reached out to me about the podcast and said, hey, we're kind of on the same page here as far as our union. Both of us are kind of disheartened as far as how our union is going. It's not how we were brought up in the union. And so, Charlie, you with me?
Yes, sir.
All right, my man. Hey, I'm going to let you introduce yourself, and then I'm going to talk about why we're here tonight, okay?
All right. My name's Charlie Miller. I'm a retiree out of Branch 1100 Garden Grove. I've been involved with the union for almost 45 years. I've served as shop steward, trustee at my branch, vice president, executive vice president, and president. I served for a number of years as a national advocate, traveling the country, especially during the days of NRP, doing the arbitrations. Today, I want to talk about what we did with the charges and the process that we went through. The hearings. I was one of 6 people that heard all the testimony, seen all the documents, raised objections during the hearing. We'll talk about that in a minute. I'd like to give a little brief explanation of how the process works. We have a national constitution in Article 10. By the way, you can see that on the website, on the NALC site. But Article 10 of the National Constitution deals with charges against officers. It's rather unique. Fact is that this is really the first time in the NALC's history that an officer has been found guilty of a charge of misconduct under Article 10. Article 10 has an appeals process. It gives any aggrieved member the right to appeal to the National Convention a decision of the Executive Council. Now, the Executive Council makes a determination whether or not the charges have validity. If they do, they appoint an investigator who renders a report within 30 days to the Executive Council. The Executive Council determines if it's necessary to have a hearing, and then they appoint a panel of 3 disinterested members to hear the case. That panel renders a decision to the Executive Council, who then votes. The hearings took place between December 2023 and February of 2024. 3 weeks, 12 days of hearings. So before we get started, I'd like to talk about something real quick. And it's about the NALC in general. You know, in any large organization, negative things happen. It doesn't make the organization bad or corrupt. We have a process to remedy our ills. And that's the charges process. And every 4 years, we have an opportunity to start anew, to elect a new slate of officers. As I said earlier, I've been a member of this union for 45 years. And in that time, I've met many wonderful people who are dedicated officers, stewards, and a lot of the rank and file take a lot of pride in the work that they do. You know, they're out there every day, 6 days a week, providing their customers the best service possible. Many letter carriers retire with hundreds and hundreds of hours of sick leave just because they don't want to burden their coworkers or let their customers down. I've seen on a regular basis shop stewards going home carrying stuffed briefcases full of grievances and then spending the rest of the night working on them. Seen branch officers who tirelessly go from one hot spot to another, trying to put fires out. I truly believe in what the NALC represents because I've seen it for myself. The NALC is more than the building on 100 Indiana Avenue. It's these letter carriers who go out and deliver the mail, do a great job every day. It's the stewards who work tirelessly, the officers. That's what the NALC is all about. I know and understand that it's not perfect everywhere, but I hope the actions of a few concerned letter carriers will inspire you to stand up and turn things around. We can be a great union again. I'd like to recognize Chris Jackson for faithfully following the oath of his office by reporting on the NALC president, President Renfroe's neglect of duty. Chris put himself on the line in reporting gross misconduct to the national president. Both Chris and James Henry, because of James's role in this, have suffered consequences. They've had all their duties stripped from them. They have demonstrated courage and poise by being falsely accused, insulted by the national president and his lackeys. They're not the only ones who have demonstrated integrity in this ordeal and courage. Brother Mike Weir, a retired national business agent, who served the membership for many years, has also been unfairly targeted. Article 10 of the Constitution requires the investigator to render a written report within 30 days to the Executive Council. His findings are conclusions based on facts gathered from evidence, such as witness interviews, official records, other evidence like photographs and videos. His report has been attacked by Renfroe supporters as being an opinion and outside the scope of his charge. However, nobody's ever said anything that Mike Weir said was false, misleading, or somehow untrue. Brother Weir conducted himself with integrity and reported where his investigation took him. And he had the courage to call out those in power. I'd also like to recognize former President Fred Rolando, who came out of retirement to board a rudderless ship in the middle of contract negotiations. And he placed the NALC bargaining team on course. He appeared at the hearings and gave credible testimony. Personally, I believe him to be a man of compassion who was deceived by somebody with deep character flaws. However, not all have acted with courage and integrity. Several notable national officers sat on the sidelines and withheld information, and they refused to testify out of fear and or self-interest. If the appeals are heard at the National Convention, we'll get an opportunity to see where everyone stands. At the convention, we anticipate some parliamentary maneuvering and unfounded technical arguments being brought forward designed to prevent the membership from exercising their rights under the NALC Constitution to hear the appeal. The Committee of Concerned Letter Carriers, the CLC, will take the initiative and vigorously fight to protect the membership's rights. There's also a defect in this system regarding Article 10. This process was investigated by, judged by, and determined by either former or current national officers almost exclusively. We all come from the same stock. We're all city letter carriers. That includes national officers. Because of my unique experience of traveling the country and doing arbitrations for years, I have seen firsthand that not all the NALC's talent and understanding rest at 100 Indiana Avenue. Excluding the rank and file from the members of the Article 10 process promulgates a so-called blue wall of silence mentality where peer pressure overcomes a national officer's sense of duty. These are certainly difficult times where you have charges pending against a national president. You have a contract that's not shown any movement in months. You have an arbitrator selected approximately 19 weeks ago now, and no arbitration dates. And I understand that the membership is frustrated. But as I said earlier, we have a means of righting our ship. And I certainly hope the delegates at the convention support our efforts to have the charges heard at the appeals heard on the charges at the convention. Vote accordingly. Vote where your heart lies. Hopefully, you'll be voting to have the appeals heard. Corey?
Thank you, my brother. Everybody knows
I didn't
how I
put you
feel
to
about
sleep,
the
did I?
Do what?
I said I didn't put you to sleep, did I?
No. All of that was great. I love the history of it. 45 years in, I'm gonna ask you something, Charlie. If you know, how many arbitrations have you done?
I would conservatively say
Just a
about
guess.
300,
About 300.
300, maybe 400.
That's
My
impressive.
first one was in 1988.
We'll have to look that up. 400 cases is impressive, my man. that's
Well, I didn't do it all at once. It was over many years.
and you still do arbitrations, is that right?
Right. A shout out to my branch, real quick. Branch 1100 has had a tradition of advocacy. We have our shop stewards doing arbitrations. And I know we're not unique in that, but we always believe in development of advocates. And I was fortunate to end up in Branch 1100. And I had a lot of great people help me and teach me and move me along in the process. So I just wanted to give a shout out to my own branch.
Now, if I'm not mistaken, 1100 is the largest branch in the country. Is that right?
Yes, it is. We are approximately 76 small branches united. We're unique amongst most of the large branches because they represent like Chicago or San Francisco or Los Angeles, New York. But we represent, like I said, 76 small cities that decided that they would ally themselves together so we would be a stronger force and have a greater influence. That strategy speaks for itself. And the number of advocates that we've trained over the years and the success rate that people have had that comes out of Branch 1100, people like Tom Young and James Henry and Manny Peralta. We've had a lot of greats that were fantastic advocates that I've learned from. And we have plenty of more coming up. So there is an advantage to join forces and unite. A long time ago, when I first started working at the post office, they told me that never worry about the numbers, always the letters. And that's philosophy has stayed with me. Always worry about NALC, not necessarily a branch number.
And you were the president of that branch, right?
Yes, sir. I was president from, let's see, I became a vice president in 1988. I was executive vice president from 1990 to 2000. And I was president till 2010 when I retired.
What's the name of the building that they meet in? Somebody gave me that one. Somebody gave me that one, bro.
They've flattered me very much, and they named it after me, the Charlie Miller Building.
Okay.
It touched my heart. I very much appreciate it. There was other people who deserved that type of recognition.
Uh-huh.
And for whatever reason, they decided to recognize me, and I was always been flattered by that.
Sorry about that. Somebody gave me that one, so I had to say it. All right. So these charges are very interesting to me, and most people that listen feel the same way. Listen to the podcast. When I read the Weir report, it spread like wildfire because most people would have never known about any of this that was going on. And if it was up to national, I imagine nobody would still have known if it wasn't put in some kind of paper. But the charges were sent to me. I read the charges on here, got a lot of feedback, like I said. Then they had the panel report. I read the panel report also. Now, look, Charlie, I asked you to come on and talk about this today, and you agreed. I also asked, and I don't know if you know this, I asked Barry Weiner to come on here also and talk about it. Because to me, there's two different sides. There's the Mr. Jackson side that brought the charges, that had the Weir report come out, kind of justifying the charges. And then you have this panel report that kind of, to me, looked extremely biased. And especially things that came in after that, as far as Mr. Weiner's opinion of Renfroe in a email before that, saying that he knew his heart and all these things. That leads me to believe that he was not neutral as required. I think that he went into it kind of with an agenda.
Well, yeah, I'll address some of that specifically, but I will say this, okay? From the onset, before we even started interviewing witnesses, we had an issue with the panel chair, Barry. He went and had ex parte conversations with the NALC attorney. Now, that isn't right. I mean, if you're going to seek advice from the attorney, you should have both parties in there. So we understand and have a good understanding what the conversation was and what the responses were. And that was flat out wrong. But that wasn't height of it. That was just the beginning of it. And like I said, as we go along and talk about the charges, I'll get more into detail on that.
All right. Now, if I say anything I shouldn't, let me know.
All right.
All right.
I'll say this, okay? There's been a lot of discussion about the Weir report being leaked, okay? And I'll just tell you this. I didn't leak the Weir report. I released it. It was given to me by the NALC's Executive Vice President, Paul Bonner. The report wasn't marked confidential. I did not sign any do not disclose agreement. And there's nothing in the Constitution that bars me from sharing the report with the membership. After all, they paid for it.
I'm glad you said that. There's no non-disclosure. You didn't sign anything like that.
Nothing.
Because, go ahead.
The only reason why I held on to it for as long as I did is that I didn't want it to interfere with the hearing process, releasing the report. That would have caused all kinds of drama and trauma. It did afterwards. It even took on some executive board action, but that was pretty much in vain. But
do you want to talk about that?
I'd rather focus on the appeals and the charges, because this is not really about me. That this is about the membership, their right to know and understand the process and what's going to occur at the national convention. I just don't want to get distracted on that, but I think I've pretty much said enough on it. I mean, if you got a question that you just dying to ask, go ahead. But I just want to focus on the charge, I think.
Right. Because here's what I thought. I'm going to go ahead and say it. Here's what I thought was odd. You have an executive council, and people that listen to me understand my position on that. You have those that they're going to straight up kiss this motherfucker's ass. And that's how I feel. You had some people that said that releasing the Weir report harmed Renfroe in some kind of way, which is completely asinine. Matter of fact, I think somebody on here that came on here, said that he didn't believe it should have been released. To me, I don't agree with that, Charlie, because it's the city letter carrier's report. And a lot of in the executive council don't feel that way. They don't think that it's the city letter carrier's report. I do. We paid for that report. And so I think that the members should have had access to that. And I read the report. If I felt like that was wrong, I wouldn't have read it. It's my report. It's the city letters carrier's report. But the same executive council that felt that way, that felt that the report should not be released, also attempted to bring up things against you as far as you being investigated for releasing the report. That's what I thought was odd. It wasn't the fact that you've got this president who, to me, and everybody knows how I feel about this, I'm not neutral when it comes to this. To me, you have this president who is the worst one we've ever had. He's a narcissist. He's dishonest, more so than anybody I've ever known before. And you have this report come out basically saying that. Instead of the executive council worrying about him and what we're going to do with him, they target you because you released the Weir report. Did you not find that odd or insulting?
Well, what I found personally amusing was a number of people that had a greater concern about who released the report than who caused the report. Imagine that.
Yeah.
I've heard the argument about that Renfroe has due process rights and all of that, but he don't have any more due process rights than anybody else. If you're brought up on charges at the branch meeting, those charges are read at the meeting. The findings are given, and a vote is taken by the membership. Shouldn't be any different for national officers. When that comment was made about the due process, I kind of laughed to myself because I had just driven home from the store and I had our local news channel on, and they were given a blow-by-blow description of what happened in court with former President Donald Trump. Now, if all of President Trump's information can be released to the public, what makes Renfroe any different?
Right.
How is Trump's due process rights any different than Renfroe's? Do we give our national officers an elite status that they're so much better than us? Now, I know a few of those folks feel that, God put them there, but actually it was by the grace of letter carriers. And I got to tell you, and this is just my own opinion, metaphorically speaking, some of those guys are still wearing their high school varsity jackets. And they're telling stories about the good old days, like the last touchdown that they had with a grievance or whatever. But the problem is that those stories are 20 and 30 years old. Ask them, what have you done for me lately?
Right.
Most of them don't have an answer.
I agree. And I think a lot of the carriers that talk about it say the same thing. When's the last time you've done anything? I think that a lot of these people, of course, to me, Renfroe was born on third and thinks he hit a triple. That's what I've always said about him, because he rode Lou's coattails. Then he gets up there and stabs him in the back. And Rolando gets smitten by him. And all he is a talker. I mean, he's had one arbitration. He had rarely any grievances. He was the branch state president from Mississippi. I think Memphis, and this is no joke, I think Memphis has more members than the entire state of Mississippi, if I'm not mistaken. And so he was the state president from Mississippi and talks really well. There's an RAA down there that says that his formal step A's are straight garbage. And so, I don't want to sit here and talk like this. I know we got a lot of stuff to do, but I agree.
Let me say this on the positive end of things, okay? And I ain't gonna lie to anybody. I'm 100% behind James Henry, and I've known the man for most of my adult life, over 30 years. And I've seen him come up. I first met him when he was being unjustly charged with the Postal Inspection Service. I represented him and did an arbitration for him. He came back like a ball of fire and became a shop steward. We had a difficult station, and he was instrumental in bringing that station in line. He was an area steward for Branch 1100 for many years, meaning that he worked more than one station. He came on the board, conducted himself ethically, impressed me. I brought him on my team as a full-time officer, did excellent work. We have over 130 different stations approximately. And so they're divided up into districts, and each district is headed by a senior vice president. And most of these districts have between 30 and 40 stations with somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000 members per district. And James headed up a district. We merged a large city, and he was instrumental overcoming some of the difficulties you have with any that type of merger. He always represented people well. He was one of the initial Step B people when the process first started. He was selected to be our leadoff and did an excellent job. Became an RAA, was well respected by the entire region. Was getting ready to run for national business agent when he was called up to headquarters as vice president just a couple of months before the election. So James is the real deal. Nobody had to puff up his resume. He spent 30 years plus earning all the stripes that he has on his sleeve as far as the accomplishment he's got. He's done over 200 arbitrations and has like an 80% success rate. I don't have that. He's a phenomenal advocate. He has a keen sense of being able to see the problem, explaining the problem, and getting arbitrators to buy into our side of the story. He was one of the first to get a decision from an arbitrator that ordered management at 12 hours, the person can go home without being disciplined. He got over $1 million settlement in San Jose for time card falsification. So he has certainly earned his stripes over the years, and he has nothing but my respect and admiration for all that he's done for our members over the years. That's the difference between the two individuals. Nothing was given to him. He fought and earned every stripe he's got on his shoulders.
Well, everybody knows how I feel about James Henry. That's the reason I'm with the CLC. But, all right, let's get started.
Okay.
What we're going to do is, and this is to me very interesting, and I hope that it's interesting to people that are listening. I'm going to read the appeal. Each one, there's 4.
Okay.
And I'm going to read those, and this is what's going to be appealed at the convention as far as the charges. And so those that are not going to be able to go to the convention, I'm going to read the appeal right here. And you're going to talk about it, or we'll talk about it. How's that sound?
Sounds good.
Now, everybody knows how I feel about reading. I hate it. And so some are 6 pages, some are 4 pages. And so I'm just going to start reading. If I have to wake you up, I will. But and then we'll talk about each charge. All right. And then we'll be done with it. How's that sound?
Sounds like a plan.
All right, my man. Here we go. Regarding appeal decision of the Executive Council to the NALC 2024 National Convention delegates. The charging party hereby appeals the decision of the NALC Executive Board on Charge 1B, filed by Director of City Delivery, July 2023, against President Renfroe for neglect of duty, which reads as follows. Charge 1, also known as Charge 1B, neglect of duty. On or about April 20th, 2023, President Renfroe took a leave of absence from the NALC during contract negotiations, which commenced on February 22nd, 2023, for an agreement which expires on midnight, May 20th, 2023. During the period of the weeks preceding the opening session, President Renfroe was missing and his whereabouts were unknown. According to the testimony of NALC officers, President Renfroe only attended one other bargaining session. President Renfroe's continual absence and no-shows during a critical time of negotiations has adversely impacted the union's ability to effectively represent the NALC's objectives during contract negotiations. In addition, President Renfroe's departure left the bargaining team with no notes or evidence of advanced preparations for negotiations. This placed the replacement negotiating team at the disadvantage of having to start from scratch midway through the negotiating period. Article 9 of the National Constitution defines the duties of the officers, including the president. Section E specifically applies to the NALC president's responsibility for carrying out the collective bargaining duties of the union. President Renfroe took leave without notice and without making any appointments to replace him during contract negotiations. This led to a lack of coordination and caused delays in making important decisions, and for a time caused a lack of direction. Having a personal crisis is a part of life, and how one deals with crisis defines a true leader. There is no indication that President Renfroe is in immediate peril, completely incapacitated, or confined to a hospital. He is receiving outpatient treatment for a condition that did not render him unable to complete the minimal duties needed to ensure ongoing collective bargaining obligations. Instead, he disappeared without any notification of where he was, how long he would be gone, and further failed to make appointments of those who could step up to protect the best interests of the membership during contract negotiations. As such, Renfroe has clearly failed to perform his duties as president during contract negotiations, a period where the membership would be the most egregiously harmed by his absence. Consequently, Renfroe has not demonstrated the ability and or desire to serve as NALC president and should be removed from office by the NALC Executive Council. Retired MBA Michael Weir was appointed as the investigator pursuant to NALC Constitution, Article 10, Removal of Charges. Investigator Weir conducted a thorough investigation, including interviews. The facts established in Investigator Weir's report. Renfroe's absence during the period of preparing for collective bargaining and engaging in collective bargaining were detrimental to the union's ability to negotiate the best possible contract for our members. Article 9, Section 1D of our Constitution states, the president shall have the authority and responsibility for carrying out the collective bargaining duties of the union. While the subcommittees handling contractual provisions were meeting, the president has taken the responsibility for the economic provisions. EVP Barner stepped up to replace our missing president, asked former President Fred Rolando to assist him. Both Barner and Rolando testified that Renfroe did not leave any notes or evidence of advanced preparation for economic bargaining. Progress was being made with Barner and Rolando until Renfroe returned. Instead of thanking Rolando, he immediately kicked Rolando off the team. A panel of 3 disinterested members, all retired national officers, was appointed by EVP Barner and held hearings. This charge was numbered as Charge 1 and addressed this charge within the 12 days of hearings from December 12, 2023 and February 16th of 2024. The panel ruled in their March 25th, 2024 report and recommendations that Renfroe was not guilty of this charge. On April 26th, the NALC Executive Council completely threw out this charge by a vote of 21-7. Regarding President Renfroe's neglect of duty prior to his rehabilitation, the president of the NALC is not omnipotent and is answerable to the Executive Council and membership. The NALC president is subject to standards of duty and accountability, just like a letter carrier. Article 9, Section 11.1 of the National Constitution places responsibility on the Executive Council to supervise the activities, affairs, and functioning of the union. As it pertains to Charge 1, the Executive Council overlooked several errors in judgment by the panel of 3. The panel committed errors in judgment by omitting several facts from consideration, such as, with respect to the preliminary matter addressed by the panel, President Renfroe's defense that he cannot be charged with anything except neglect of duty is a farcical splitting of hairs. As arguendo would have, there's nothing in the Constitution that specifically establishes a duty not to steal. So, Does that give the president license to steal? Of course not. Such acts of misconduct are implied by law to be neglect of duty, whether specifically cited or not. Simple logic dictates that the panel erred in judgment when it agreed with President Renfroe's flawed defense. The panel further erred in judgment and then exceeded its authority by proffering, then granting retroactive FMLA and ADA protections that were not requested by President Renfroe. If Renfroe had actually requested FMLA and ADA, the authority to grant such protections rests exclusively with the Executive Council. Under federal law, the president, like any other letter carrier, is required to request FMLA and or request to be provided a reasonable accommodation under ADA guidelines from his employer, i.e., the Executive Council. There is no evidence that President Renfroe requested FMLA or an ADA reasonable accommodation from his employer. It is also true that the panel erred in judgment when it granted retroactive leniency for President Renfroe's neglect of duty prior to entering a rehabilitation. Further, the courts have ruled consistently that retroactive leniency is not a reasonable accommodation as defined by the ADA. The panel omitted the charging party's objections during the hearing regarding the appearance of bias concerning the chair's proffering a retroactive ADA and FMLA defense for the accused. The objections are significant because the panel's report infers that both parties were in acceptance of its rulings and determinations. While the panel chair is a polished wordsmith, it is inaccurate to say that the charging party agreed with the chair's findings regarding ADA and FMLA. The Executive Council and panel erred in judgment when it used flawed reasoning to grant FMLA retroactively and ADA considerations not requested by President Renfroe as a ploy to avoid a penalty for neglect of duty prior to Renfroe's stay at a rehabilitation facility. We therefore request that the panels and recommendation be set aside and the delegation consider removing President Renfroe from office. The panel erred in judgment and acted inconsistently with the national Constitution when it replaced the Executive Council's supervisory authority with that of the President's Chief of Staff, who is not a letter carrier or an elected officer, and was center of controversy within charge number 2. She is the President's at-will employee and has no administrative authority within the national Constitution. Even if what she says is true, that President Renfroe reported to her every day, there is nothing in the record to reflect that she kept the Executive Council or the economic bargaining team informed of anything. The panel erred in judgment when it accepted Renfroe's claim that the president has no reporting authority. It is pure hubris to claim that the NALC president is omnipotent and has no reporting authority. The NALC Constitution places Executive Council authority as second only to the convention and is responsible to supervise the activities, affairs, and functioning of the union. The Executive Council has no authority to amend or modify the national Constitution by abdicating its responsibilities to the President. Therefore, the Executive Council supported the panel's conclusion that the President has no reporting authority should be set aside. Next component of charge number 1, President Renfroe's continual absence and no-shows during a critical time of negotiations. The panel made an error in judgment when it determined the burden of proof wasn't met. Their summation of this component of charge number 1 is analogous to saying, no big deal, the letter carrier was absent and the route eventually got delivered anyway. Letter carriers are not afforded such a defense, and neither should the national president of the union. There is no dispute that bargaining on the economic package was late starting, not until April of 2023. There is no dispute that the bargaining team of Executive VP Barner and former President Rolando had to start from scratch. It is undisputed that former President Rolando has concerns that USPS lead negotiator Tolino would use the late start as a procedural argument against the union in interest arbitration. In the early months of 2023, there was reason for optimism only to have that replaced with apprehension over the disappearance of the NALC's chief negotiator and many months of little to no information on the progress of contract negotiations. This has caused great unrest and despair within our union. The calculus behind negotiations isn't always the results or when the contract is ratified. It is the appearance being prepared to take up the fight for city letter carriers. The excuse that the last few contracts took months past the termination of the agreement is wearing thin. Given the circumstances of the NALC's late start to economic negotiations, we can only point a finger at President Renfroe for the long, drawn-out negotiations. The membership's expectations for a timely resolutions are not misplaced or unreasonable. It is the delay that's unreasonable. After less than 6 months in office, Renfroe had demonstrated that he was not fit to lead our great union. This appeal prays that the delegates do the right thing by voting to overturn the Executive Council determination, uphold the charge, and then determine that President Renfroe be removed from office. And so that's number one, Charlie. Did I put you to sleep?
No, I was riveted by every word you said.
All right. Well, let's talk about some things. I know you want to talk about some things, but so do I.
All right. Let's have it.
When I first read that part of the panel's report, the disinterested panel, when they said that, especially this charge here, and I think that you were onto this as well. I think we may have talked. I can't remember. But during this time when they was talking about that he had no communication with anybody, they challenged Mr. Weir. And they said he provided nothing showing that, any evidence showing that he didn't keep in communication with anybody. Basically, that's what they said. But what they did do was they took the word of this chief of staff, who I don't think had been questioned by Mr. Weir. And if that's not true, then correct me, please. I don't think she had been questioned by Mr. Weir. I think she came up with that Mr. Renfroe had kept in contact with me during this period of time. And they took her word for that. I thought that odd because out of the two, if I was taking this to arbitration, Mr. Weir has nothing to gain. He was asked to do this by Mr. Barner. And so he does this report, all these findings, very thorough. I remember he called me several times about what happened in Biloxi with Mrs. Miller. And I couldn't help him that much. You know, I could have made up something, but I wasn't going to do that. But so he has nothing to gain. He has no skin in the game. There is one, however, that does have skin in the game. And she works for Mr. Renfroe. And they took her word for it. So out of the two, Mr. Weir, no skin in the game, and the chief of staff who does, because if Renfroe's gone, she's gone. I thought it odd that they took her word for it, and she had nothing in this reports, I don't believe. Is that right?
Well, let me say this, okay? I sat through the entire hearing, chiefly focused, like I do in arbitration, on the reactions of the decision makers, because my opponent in the arbitration is not management, it's the decision maker, trying to get the decision maker to understand my side and where we're coming from. And I did not see any bias in the other two panel members, Mr. Hillman and Sister Myra Warren. I think they acted ethically and went according to their conscience. I can't say the same thing about Barry Wine. I can't. There was a bias here. Now, it may have been a natural bias because this whole process was administered by, like I said before, either former or current national officers. And you do have that, the same mentality that the police have, that blue wall of silence and obedience and peer pressure. Most of those people actually think that they're special people because they are national officers, and they forget that they're just letter carriers like the rest of us, or was in my case. But Barry had, he's a capable person, and he has a lot of influence with people, and he's very persuasive. And not to say that the other two panelists didn't have the ability to stand up, but Barry was the one that wrote the panel decision. And, you know, one of the problems that I have with the panel's decision, he talks about a dissenting opinion. And he paraphrases a couple of lines of what the dissent said. But in all tripart arbitration panels, even the Supreme Court of the United States, when you write a dissenting opinion, when there's a dissenting opinion, it's written and it's included in the overall decision. He did not do that. And if you look at their decision, they didn't even concur, signing off on concurrence on it, at least the copy that I received. So like I said earlier, I think that there is a definite flaw in the process where you have either current or former national officers passing judgment on their peers.
Right.
We're all letter carriers. You should have had rank and file people on that panel as well.
So let's talk about another thing that I had issue with is this ADA and FMLA, because you're obviously an advocate. You've done about three times as many cases as I have. And you talk about this FMLA ADA defense that Mr. Weiner just pulled out of his ass. It was not brought forward by Mr. Renfroe or his attorney.
Well, he didn't have an attorney there. Brian represented himself.
Okay, so he had. I thought you had said that the panel did some ex parte communication.
That's with the NALC's attorney, Keith Secular.
I got you.
Now, let me just say something about this. The Constitution, the NALC Constitution, provides that the national president can hire anybody he needs in order to serve the membership. That includes bookkeepers, accountants, HR specialists, and attorneys. So all of these people are at-will attorneys, at-will employees by President Renfroe's authorization. He hires them, signs their contracts if they have them. And the law firm that represents the NALC over the years has made millions and millions and millions of dollars off of our union. And I'm not saying that they took the money unjustly or anything like that, but we have been a regular cash cow for them. So when a legal opinion is going to be given, what do you think the chances are that the administration is not going to be given the benefit of the doubt based on their ties together?
Right.
And I get, that they serve all the members and everything else, but they're still the national president's at-will employee. And he can terminate them at any time and hire somebody else. And then they're on the gravy train.
So who's in this meeting?
It was just Barry Weiner and Keith Secular. And that was our initial objection. And that was really the first hint that we had of the direction that Weiner was going. And I got to tell you, Chris argued vigorously over that issue, and it wasn't even mentioned. We filed an objection. It wasn't even mentioned in the decision. So
who wrote the decision?
Barry Weiner. Yeah. So, and like I said, I took exception to the fact that he didn't include the dissenting opinion. But anyway, one of the things that was key about this charge was President Renfroe's claim that he was not accountable to anybody. He didn't have to ask anybody to take leave or account for himself. And what he doesn't seem to understand is that he's literally number 3 in the pecking order of authority in the NALC. First comes the membership at the convention. They rule supreme. Next is the executive council. And you've already covered the constitutional language that gives them that authority. And he comes in third. So, and it's because of a lack of integrity and a lack of backbone that the executive council has subverted themselves to him, except for approximately 7 to 9 people who did stand up. But go ahead.
When I was talking and with Mr. Vafiates, I don't know if you heard that episode.
I did.
But he was talking about this defense of the ADA and FMLA. And so they took that into account when they made their decision. And so I think it's important to understand when Weiner interjected that argument, ADA and FMLA, and I was saying earlier that you're an advocate, very skilled. When you go into arbitration, we're dealing with attendance related issues. And at the first time at the hearing, I just decide as an advocate, I'm going to say all of his occurrences are FMLA, and that has not been brought forward at the informal, formal DRT. Wasn't told to the advocates, my opposing advocate before the arbitration, hey, y'all got to understand that we got an issue with FMLA. Arbitrator's not going to consider that. It's a
No,
new
they're
argument.
not.
It's a new argument.
Well,
Everybody in this meeting is high level. I mean, Renfroe's only done one case, but Weiner, he's a very skilled advocate. I know that he was in my training back in 2012. He was part of the group that came in and trained us or talked to us, kind of a panel. Everybody's high level union in there. And so you took great exception. I know that you and Mr. Jackson both took great exception to them just him pulling out of his ass this defense of FMLA and ADA. So do you want to talk about that, or is that something you don't want to talk about?
yeah, well, we went nuclear over that.
Okay.
And,
I would have to.
There was some really hard feelings and hard words used in that. And Chris flat out told Weiner that he was being biased. And, he had a hissy fit over that. But, you just can't be a defense attorney and a judge at the same time.
Right.
You're either one or the other. You either step down from your role and have somebody replace you and go and defend the man, which he probably needed somebody there. But or you don't get involved and don't make a defense for the accused. And here's the other thing. I've dealt with dozens of cases that deal with alcohol and substance abuse issues.
Right.
Letter carriers being terminated for it, with progressive discipline. And when we raise this defense, it's a mitigating defense. It's not something that just says you get off. Very few people, and if you look at the NALC's arbitration record for drug and alcohol defense, we're only about 20%, where it's either sustained or modified. The majority of them get denied. So that's what's farcical about this whole thing, is that nothing, not even a censor, which is like analogous to a letter of warning. It's all based on a defense that was proffered by the judge. So, like I said, it wasn't a pleasant moment in the hearing. And I think that caused an adjournment for the day, if I'm not mistaken.
And so the issue y'all had was Mr. Weiner, who wrote the report, basically implied in his report that everybody's in agreement with this defense.
Oh, no. That was completely 100% wrong. We did not agree with it. What we did do was, based on what he argued, we went by the letter of the law as if he did request it, and argued that while he was in rehab, ADA covered him, but his conduct prior to rehab, and even the ADA says this, is he's still accountable for. And that's where we adjusted our position, like you have to in an arbitration. When an arbitrator makes a ruling, you have to make an adjustment. You can't just stay with your same strategy when he's already shot you down. So you make a change, and that's what we did.
So the executive council, when they say that this ADA, it shields him from any kind of, I don't want to say punishment, that sounds terrible, but any kind of punishment, that's not true.
No, and they know better. They're advocates too. Every one of them up there is advocates. So they know what the truth is. They're resting on a lie. And let me tell you something else too. Well, really, I mean, that was, like I said, a nuclear issue. But this was somewhat less of a nuclear issue, but just as important, is when the panel accepted or replaced the executive council's authority with that of the Renfroe's chief of staff. It would be understandable, possibly, if she was a go-between between Renfroe and the executive council, reporting to them on a regular basis. But the fact that she didn't report to the executive council or the bargaining teams or anybody, she just kept the information to herself. And I don't know if Renfroe told her to keep the information to herself or not. I don't have any evidence one way or the other. But that doesn't satisfy the requirement of the Constitution. And it doesn't fulfill the responsibilities of the executive board, who have the general supervisory responsibility of the union over the president. Like I said, the president's number 3 in the pecking order of authority within the NALC. When the executive board's not in session, when the convention's not in session, he rules the roost. But when the executive board's there, they make the calls, they make the decisions, they give the direction. And then when convention's in session, the membership does that.
Again, I want to make everybody aware. I hope they understand. Back when I talked to Mr. Vafietes, I put a challenge out to anybody and everybody on that executive council to come on here and defend their actions. And he reached out immediately, so I'll give him that. I also, when Mr. Weiner kept emailing me about reading the Weir report, reading the panel report, he kept emailing me. And I said, hey, come on here and talk to the people about it. I asked you, come on here and talk to the people about it. You said, when do you want me to come on? Give me a spot. And so I've asked everybody to come on here. So this just ain't me jumping on anybody. I asked all of them because the carriers are interested. This is, like you said, this is the first time that this has happened. And I think the carriers are very interested in it. Again, and this is something that's going to happen at the convention. So I'm glad that people are getting to hear what the charges are and defending what you're talking about as far as these appeals. And so,
well, Corey, I think you're a very fair person. In some cases, maybe too fair, but I do believe that you're a good, fair individual. And there is one other thing that I want to address about this. You know, whether or not the burden of proof was met. Okay. You know, I find it fascinating that if you look at this winter's 2024 NALC activists, they stress the importance of branch presidents starting to prepare for local negotiations. Now, this is the winter of 2024. Months before negotiations start, the NALC is advising the local branch presidents to start preparing for local negotiations. And yet, when we're in national negotiations for our contract over our very livelihoods, there was zero indication that any preparations was made for the financial package. Two authorities, both former President Rolando and Executive Vice President Paul Bonner, testified that they had nothing. They started from scratch. That's dereliction of duty. There's preparations that you make before you go into national negotiations. As a president with local negotiations, we had folders and booklets made up with bargaining positions and talking points for each city that we went into well before local negotiations started. We had teams broke down with assignments. Now, I'm not saying that the teams weren't made and the non-economic issues weren't bargained over, because they certainly were. Members of the executive council did meet on non-economic issues with the Postal Service during this period. But we did not start economic negotiations over our pay benefits until late April. I think we all have to be concerned about the ramifications on that. You know, Talino was telling Fred that, you know, you guys never started this late before. And that, to me, would be an arbitration. That would be a call sign that something's coming up from behind that. I know a lot of people are counting on a lot of things here. There is a possibility that we could have some problems because of our late start. And I won't speculate any further. I've never conducted national negotiations, so I don't want to go any further than that.
All right. Anything else you want to say about that one charge? You want me to get to this? I mean, the appeal, you want to get to the second one?
Well, and just this, for the delegates at the convention, you have the power and authority to make a determination on these appeals. You may feel that we're not right and vote them down. That's your right to do that. But I do encourage you and beseech you to let the process go. Stop any parliamentary or technical maneuvering to keep the appeals from being heard. You have a right to do that as well.
All right, here we go. Number 2.
Okay. All right.
Regarding appeal decision of the Executive Council to the NALC 2024 National Convention delegates. The charging party hereby appeals the decision of the NALC Executive Board on Charge 2B, filed by Director of City Delivery, July 2023, against President Renfroe for circulating false or misleading statements about an NALC officer. Brian Renfroe shared and referenced confidential information about an employee matter, which reads as follows. Charge 2, aka Charge 2B, circulating false or misleading statements about NALC officer. Brian Renfroe shared and referenced confidential information about an employee matter. On or about March 30th, 2023, at Region 1's training in San Diego, California, stories began circulating about NALC Vice President James Henry having inappropriate contact with female headquarters staff. Testimony from several sources assert that President Renfroe had informed them of alleged complaints prior to the regional training. Brian Renfroe shared and referenced confidential information about an employee matter. When NALC Vice President James Henry became aware of the false allegations after the Region 1 training, he immediately attempted to meet with President Renfroe regarding the unfounded accusations. Brother Henry has documented his numerous unsuccessful efforts to meet with Renfroe, who initially promised to meet with him but failed to do so, and further failed to respond to subsequent efforts by Brother Henry to meet regarding the false rumors spread. Vice President Henry had no choice but to approach Executive Vice President Paul Barner and insist upon an investigation. An investigation was subsequently conducted by EVP Barner, and a special meeting of the Executive Council was scheduled. At the meeting, EVP Barner informed the council that he had the matter fully investigated and there was no substance to the allegations. Brian Renfroe shared and referenced confidential information about employee matter. Article 9 of the National Constitution, Executive Council 17, requires the Executive Council to investigate. The Council has the responsibility to investigate and act against any member who circulates false or misleading statements about an officer of this union. Accordingly, any member who engages in such conduct has violated the national Constitution. It should be recognized that false accusations of this nature have ruined careers and lives, and the harm to Brother Henry caused by false rumors circulated nationwide has already been done. This type of allegation has the potential to impede any officer's ability to carry out their assigned duties. Now it is time to do the right thing, and the only way to do that is to publicly clearing and retracting the untrue falsehoods initiated and spread by Renfroe. Furthermore, President Renfroe acted in the capacity of his office, has exposed the union to possible litigation and liability because of his actions. Such rash and unprincipled behavior has disqualified him from a leadership position within the NLC. Therefore, Renfroe should be removed from the office. The undersigned did not cause this calamity or its timing. It was the leadership failure of Renfroe. Each of us has a responsibility to act expeditiously on this matter and move forward with the business of the union. Retired MBA Michael Weir was appointed as the investigator pursuant to NALC Constitution Article 10, removal of officers. Investigator Weir conducted a thorough investigation, including interviews. The facts established in Investigator Weir's report. The two female staffers testified. One stated that VP Henry grazed her in a crowded hallway when officers and staffers were receiving a tour of the Marietta facility. She did not say anything at the time, nor did she follow the procedure and go to NALC headquarters HR department. The other female staffer testified that VP Henry came up behind her in the lunch line, stood too close, but did not touch her. She did not say anything at the time, nor did she follow the procedure and go to NALC's HR department. President Renfroe discussed it with at least 7 officers and past officers. Some testified that he was seeking advice, and others testified that Renfroe had made up his mind that VP Henry was guilty. Renfroe further ignored numerous documented requests to meet with VP Henry regarding the matter. A panel of 3 disinterested members, all retired national officers, was appointed by EVP Barner and held hearings. This charge was numbered as Charge 2 and addressed this charge within the 12 days of hearing from December 12, 2023 and February 16th of 2024. 2 of the 3 panel members ruled in their March 25th, 2024 report and recommendation that Renfroe was not guilty of this charge. There was 1 unnamed panel member who dissented. The panel chair exceeded his authority by not including a dissenting opinion. On April 26th, the NALC Executive Council completely threw out this charge on the panel's recommendation by a vote of 19-9. Circulating false or misleading statement about an NALC officer is the subject of this appeal. Testimony from former NALC President Rolando and the NALC HR Director that sharing confidential information about an allegation is a violation of the NALC policy on sexual harassment. As a preliminary matter, the Executive Council made an error in judgment when it assumed this charge was filed on behalf of Brother Henry. This charge was filed on behalf of the membership as a means of halting the spread of vicious and salacious rumors against any officer of the NALC. The majority of the panel of 3 erred in judgment when it determined that President Renfroe did not intend to spread vicious and salacious rumors about Vice President Henry. Intent means rea, goes to the state of mind of the perpetrator at the time when the event occurred. Since there is no way to crawl inside someone's mind, intent is therefore established by inference. Chiefly, one must ask, why would President Renfroe call so many people allegedly for advice? Here's why. The Executive Council failed to consider the testimony of 2 of President Renfroe's staffers who made the claims. First, the Chief of Staff claimed she was on tour of the Marietta facility with approximately 26 others in a hallway when she felt her rear end being grazed. The second staffer claimed she was at the end of the line for lunch when VP Henry come up from behind her and stood too close. Both women allegedly took their complaint to President Renfroe and did not file a complaint with HR. At Brother Henry's insistence, EVP Barner referred the matter to HR, who investigated and determined the evidence to be inconclusive. Based on all the evidence, neither claim establishes anything other than perception based on what can best described as benign incidental contact. President Renfroe never gave a reasonable explanation of why he needed advice from a minimum of 7 different people for such a benign incident instead of just turning the matter over to HR. President Renfroe never offered an explanation why he didn't seek VP Henry's side of the story before he sought advice from others. While all denied spreading the rumor, it is obvious that someone talked, and President Renfroe told more than 7 people. It's more than likely more than 1 or even all talked because it's just human nature to spread salacious gossip. It's important to note that all those who approached VP Henry about the rumors were NALC members and branch officers from around the country. A non-letter carrier chief of staff is unlikely to have NALC contacts sufficient to spread rumors, and it's just as unlikely that the other member of President Renfroe's staff had the ability to circulate the rumor nationwide. Neither staffer admitted to circulating the rumor, so the only remaining possibility is that it came from President Renfroe. The fact that 3 testified they were contacted by the president claimed that the incident, as described by Renfroe, was groping, grabbing, rubbing ass. AVP Barner testified that President Renfroe wasn't asking for advice. He was making allegations, and in his mind, made up. The testimony establishes the story was unnecessarily embellished and accusatory. There's only one plausible explanation for embellishing the incident, and that was to inflict harm on VP Henry. The only possible explanation for talking to so many over incidental contact is to ensure the rumors would spread. It is simply not reasonable to believe that the President Renfroe needed advice from others over a benign incident when he didn't even have VP Henry's side of the story. President Renfroe was aware of the NAL's position on sexual harassment, as his name is on the December 2020 policy letter. There's no reasonable, plausible explanation for President Renfroe not turning the matter over to NALC HR professional to investigate the matter unless the intent was to spread salacious rumors about VP Henry. The ponderance of evidence establishes the majority executive council findings regarding the issue were an error in judgment. The majority omissions appear to be a willful act of ignorance. The decisions of the delegates at the national conventions are supreme. After less than 6 months in office, Renfroe has demonstrated that he is not fit to lead our great union. This appeal prays that the delegates do the right thing by voting to remove President Renfroe from his position and respectfully submitted. So there's number 2.
Well, one of the most overlooked aspects of these allegations that were made against Vice President Henry is that both allegations came from President Renfroe's personal assistants. Both incidents allegedly happened at the same time during the Executive Council meeting in Marietta, Georgia in January 2023. It should be noted that according to Renfroe's later testimony, that this was at a period of time that he was at its peak in his alcoholism, suffering from the effects of it. Executive Vice President Paul Bonner told me that Renfroe was late for showing up at that meeting in Marietta. And that when he got out of his car, he stumbled and Bonner went to grab him before he fell. And he said he smelt of alcohol then. This is the backdrop where, the allegations against Brother Henry came from. One of the most frustrating things about this whole charge was that the panel chair threw up another roadblock to presenting our case. He said he would not consider any evidence that proved James Henry innocent of the allegations, which in effect banned us from presenting evidence proving that the allegations were false or wrong. I mean, it stands to reason if the allegations are false or wrong, then Brother Henry wasn't guilty of the allegations. But we couldn't go down that road. This is particularly frustrating since 3 witnesses testified that the allegations against Brother Henry, Renfroe wasn't investigating, he was accusing. One witness even claimed that Renfroe was drunk when he told him about the story. This left us with the burden to prove that Renfroe intended to harm Vice President Henry. Intent is a very difficult thing to prove. You have to have the perpetrator confess or have testimony that the perpetrator told them that, what his intent was. Short of that, you have circumstantial evidence. One thing layered upon another, upon another, upon another. And in this case, there was weighty circumstantial evidence. Why would you need to talk to 7 different people when you have a head of HR that's got 30 years of experience in these matters, has an MBA, and gets paid by the NALC almost $150,000 a year to do his job? Why wouldn't you start right there with the professional, with somebody that knows what they're doing? Why would you go to so many officers and former officers and tell the story? I personally believe that the number 7 is too low. I believe the number is much higher. I don't have any evidence of that. I just believe that he talked to more people than he admitted to. Yeah. As a matter of fact, at the Executive Council meeting, he admitted to talking to 8 people because at that time he included the former President Bill Young. So, it's pretty obvious when you talk to a myriad of people about a salacious story that there is really no expectation for them to stay silent about it. It's human nature to gossip.
Right.
I mean, one thing that Renfroe complains about to this day on the Executive Council is all the so-called leaks, people talking. So if he knew that it would be leaked, then don't you think his intent was to get the story around?
Well, here's my thing, and this is just me speculating. Rolando, when you read the Weir report, Fred Rolando talks about Renfroe as a chronic womanizer. Major issues in the past with him being a womanizer. That could have been to deflect off of him onto someone else. Two people that worked for Renfroe are the ones who came up with these allegations or whatever. In arbitration, Charlie, and you're the same. I can prove intent. I could prove his intent in arbitration. If he was in front of an arbitrator, if he was on the stand, if I was cross-examining Renfroe, I could prove his intent to harm Henry very easily. A lot of people said, well, you can't really prove intent. I can do that. Because when you talk about who he talked to, past President Young, who all did you talk to? Let's go down the line. You talked to President Young. What did he tell you to do? What was his advice? You talked to this person. What was their advice? You talked to this person. What was their advice? You talked to this person. What was their advice? Now you went and talked to this person. What was their advice? That's 5. You talked to this individual. What was their advice? You talked to this individual. What was their advice? That's 7. Imagine that in arbitration. You're going over, that's going to take about 20 minutes for him to explain each individual that he went to and what was their advice. Either all of them gave extremely shitty advice, nobody knew what to do, or you're intentionally attempting to spread this rumor. And so I think it'd be very easy to prove intent what he did. And it fires me up about this one. And everybody knows how I feel about this charge because I love Mr. Henry. And I've seen this man and I know how spiritual he is, what a man of God he is. And have this son of a bitch going around doing this to that man fires me up every time I talk about it. I can't talk about this charge. It's very difficult for me to talk about this because I know Mr. Henry and I know his heart. And to have this womanizing son of a bitch in Renfroe doing this, it always pisses me off. So you have to forgive me. But I could very easily prove his intent because he's going to sit on that stand and he's going to tell how many people he talked to, what was their advice, why did you keep going after the first person? The first person, surely, if it's Mr. Young or whoever, said that needs to be taken to HR.
Well,
if that person's do what?
As a matter of fact, President Rolando was one of the first persons he talked to. And
well, surely to God, he said, go to
told
HR.
him to take it to HR. That's exactly
why
what
would you go to the second person?
Our point exactly.
Why would you go to the second? If you talk to President Rolando and he says, you've got to take that to HR, why the second person? Why the third? Why the fourth? Why the fifth? Why the sixth? Why the seventh? And for the executive council to be that fucking stupid to sit here and dismiss this charge against this man, and then you see what he's done to him since then, where he's taken his responsibilities away from him. Here's a man that is begging and pleading to speak with him about, hey, we got to address some things, man. You're saying things about me. We need to sit down and talk about them. 2 things. That proves you're not a man, that you wouldn't sit down with this gentleman and talk about it and let him vent. You're not a man to begin with. And second, it's intentional. You're trying to harm this gentleman. That's a very easy charge for me to accept, not just because I love Mr. Henry, but because to me, like I said, if I'm an advocate on the stand, I'm blistering Renfroe on that. The arbitrator is going to rule on that. He's going to put his pen down. You know what I'm talking about after that testimony. He's done. And so I can very easily prove intent, especially when you told me that Rolando is one of the first ones he went to and said, go to HR.
I think that there was ample evidence of intent. I honestly do. But if you don't want to hear the evidence, if you don't want to see the obvious and you close your mind to it and you plug up your ears and la 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 and not pay attention to it, then obviously you're going to say that someone didn't meet the burden of proof.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened here. I mean, there was clear evidence. You know, this didn't occur immediately. It took a little while for it to get around the country. By the time Henry became aware of it, this is the end of March, beginning of April 2023. that he heard that this rumor was circulating. He got it he got the information from Region One's regional training, and he immediately acted on it. He contacted Renfroe for a meeting. He wanted to know what the story was, and Renfroe played dodgeball with him. To this day, to this very day, Renfroe's never talked to him about it.
He's a coward.
Well, that seems like a reasonable assumption to me.
I've caught him that for a while now. I think he's harmed the letter carriers more than anybody that's ever been in existence of the NALC.
Well, there's something to be said about experience.
Yes.
And there's a lot of factors that play into this. Sometimes stuff just happens. I don't think anybody honestly knew to the extent that Renfroe had an alcohol problem. For Christ's sakes, this union was founded in a bar. You go to any convention, there's no elbow room at the bar.
Right.
Unfortunately, alcohol seems to be part and parcel of the whole organization, which probably isn't, given what's happened here, a healthy thing. And maybe it is a good thing. It gives people an opportunity to look at this. As branch president, I had one time 13 full-time officers and 3 or 4 part-time people. Problems came up along those lines where allegations were made against officers or stewards or something like that. I knew better than being judge, jury, and executioner. I didn't conduct an investigation. I had signed my trustees to do that. They'd go out and investigate and render a report. And if the person was guilty of something, I gave them an option. You can resign or you can face charges. And the couple of times that those issues came up, the people did the right thing and they walked away. You can't be everybody's buddy. You got to be honest and you got to be fair, because fairness just doesn't go to the people that you associate with. Fairness goes to the rank and file member out there who was affected by this. And you can't put people's names out. And that's one of the things that the head of HR came in and testified to, about the liability that you run by giving names and instances and telling the whole story to people. They tell you not to say anything about it because they understand it's human nature to talk about stuff like that. And the more people you talk about, the higher the risk of the information getting out. And the proof here is in the pudding. The information got out. Somebody or somebodies, plural, spoke about it. I personally believe, given the state that Renfroe was in at the time, that he just put it on blast. He told a bunch of people. But I can't prove that. That's my personal belief.
Another exception I took to that panel report was it kind of implied Henry's guilt. And, the verbiage in it, it kind of made him sound guilty, but, there was really nothing conclusive. I took exception to that.
Well, when you work for the national president or you're siding with him, that's how the report would come out.
Yeah, it kind of made Renfroe the victim. It seemed like, I was thinking, what the fuck are they talking about?
9 members of the executive council felt that Renfroe was guilty of the charge. 9 members. This isn't something that was a bunch of humbug stuff. People deliberated, and 9 members of the executive council found him culpable of the charge.
And there's 26. How many are there?
28. 19 voted the other way.
That's crazy, isn't it?
Well, it's not just crazy, but it's disappointing, because I've known a lot of these guys, some of them 20, 30 years, and I had great respect for them. And I even talked to a couple of them. And I told them, I says, this is how you're going to be remembered.
Yeah, I hope so.
This is how you're going to be remembered, because if these charges get heard, they're going to have to stand up on their vote. It's just not going to be a simple aye or nay. You're going to have to stand up. And it even may come down to a roll call vote where your name is called out, and it starts with the national officers.
I'd
where
like
you're
to know who
called
they
out,
were.
and they have to tell you where they stand.
I know that there are some business agents that people had questioned them and they said it's none of their business. Now, these are people that work for the city letter carrier. Tell them it's none of their business how they voted.
Well,
That to me, that's asinine.
I think it's disgraceful that it was done by secret ballot.
Oh, me too. Yeah,
I
I
mean,
called that.
that's just an excuse for cowardness. Some of those guys were legitimately fearful. Even when I talked to some of them, they were visibly shaking and stuttering because they were scared to talk to me.
Pathetic. I mean, these are adults. But I said that they're going to circle the wagons around this son of a bitch. They're going to do it in private, so nobody knows. That's what cowards do. To me, all of them that voted against that one, all of those to me are cowards because you didn't do the right thing. Based off of the Weir report, what I saw, based off of these, telling 7 different people, that's intent to harm Mr. Henry. There's no doubt about it. And if you can't see that,
let's not forget 3 of those 7 people said that it wasn't an investigative session; it was an accusatory session they had already made up his mind.
Yeah, without even talking to Henry.
Right. So that's why there's an appeal, and that's why we're going to be taking up some time at the convention going over this. This is really up to the delegates. This is where the rubber meets the road. The convention is supreme, and the direction that they set the NALC. No lawyer, no officer, nobody but the individual delegates have a yay or a nay in this. It's their decision.
All right. Now to number 3. You ready?
Yes, sir.
Regarding appeal decision of the Executive Council to the NALC 2024 National Convention delegates. NALC Branch 1100 retiree Charles M. Miller hereby appeals the decision of the NALC Executive Board to impose a penalty not fitting of the charge which President Renfroe was found guilty of by the panel of 3 in the Executive Council. Charge 3-2A was filed by Director of City Delivery dated July 2023 against President Renfroe for conduct impaired driving after hours in NALC-owned vehicle, which reads as follows. Charge 3, aka Charge 2A, conduct impaired driving after hours in NALC-owned vehicle. While driving an NALC vehicle after work hours at 10:49 p.m. on Wednesday, 9/12/2018, according to the attached Superior Court of the District of Columbia Criminal Division, then Executive Vice President Renfroe was arrested for driving under the influence of alcohol and or drug or any combination thereof, DUI. The Superior Court narrative as detailed in relevant parts stated, the police heard excessive honking when Renfroe almost hit 2 cyclists. An unknown female waved down the police car and told them she believed the driver, Renfroe, was intoxicated. The police turned around and followed Renfroe, who twice crossed double yellow lines. He was then pulled over, and the police stated Renfroe smelled of alcohol and his speech was slurred. The police also noticed him swaying while standing, and he had bloodshot eyes. Renfroe admitted to drinking at the Alibi Bar. When the police were talking to Renfroe, he admitted that he probably would not pass the test and probably should not have driven home. However, he refused to take the standard field sobriety test, SFST, stating he first needed to consult with a lawyer. At that point, the police officers placed Renfroe under arrest for driving under the influence, DUI. Renfroe's drinking, then driving an NALC car almost caused serious injury or possible death to 2 cyclists and created a serious liability to the NALC. The NALC vehicles are provided for business use and are not intended to be used for bar runs. Retired NBA Mike Weir was appointed as the investigator pursuant to NALC Constitution, Article 10, Removal of Officers. Investigator Weir conducted a thorough investigation, including interviews. The facts established in Investigator Weir's report. President Renfroe was arrested for driving under the influence, DUI, on 9/12/2018 at 10:49 p.m. while driving an NALC car. He was EVP at the time and did not report this arrest to then President Rolando. He refused the breathalyzer. This arrest first became known when the charging party discovered the arrest online prior to this charge. Renfroe lied to the executive council, claiming it never happened, then had to admit the truth when the police reports of the DUI were produced. A panel of 3 disinterested members, all retired national officers, was appointed by EVP Barner and held hearings. This charge was renumbered as Charge 3 and addressed within the 12 days of hearings from December 12, 2023 and February 16th of 2024. The panel ruled in their March 25th, 2024 report and recommendations that Renfroe was guilty of this charge and recommended a formal written public reprimand to be published in the Postal Record, NALC Bulletin, and on NALC.org website. On April 26th, the NALC Executive Council upheld the panel's guilty recommendation by a vote of 17-11. This is the first time in history that any national president has ever been found guilty of a charge by the Executive Council. However, they did not approve the panel's recommendation of a reprimand. Instead, the council revoked his access to driving NALC-owned or rented vehicle for 1 year. As a defense, Renfroe submitted a brochure titled, "Why Alcoholics Lie." With that defense provided, how can we ever tell when he is lying and when he is not? Impaired driving after hours in an NALC vehicle. The facts are not in dispute. Brian Renfroe drove an NALC staff car while impaired and was arrested. He hid this fact from his employer, the NALC. When discovered, he lied and told the Executive Council it didn't happen, even in the face of irrefutable evidence. This act of deceit establishes a consciousness of guilt which occurred while Renfroe was sober. The fact that Renfroe never came clean waives any consideration of mitigation for an offense for which a letter carriers would face the most severe forms of discipline. Ironically, the fact that Renfroe concealed the arrest for over 6 years and carried out his normal duties nullifies any requirement for the NLC to grant retroactive ADA protection for his dereliction of duty. He has been found guilty of the charge by the panel and the Executive Council. The panel recommended a censor to be published in the Postal Record. However, the Executive Council imposed a year-long suspension of NALC driving privileges. The question before the convention is, did the Executive Council impose an appropriate penalty? The charging party contends that removal for office is the appropriate penalty for this willful misconduct and deceitful neglect of duty by not reporting his arrest for driving under the influence. The decisions of the delegates of the national conventions are supreme, and you are being asked to determine if someone who has such an unprincipled moral compass is fit for office, and if not, should he remain in office. This appeal prays that the delegates do the right thing by voting to remove President Renfroe from his position. Respectfully submitted by you. So there's number 3.
Yeah, well, I filed this appeal based on the Executive Council's decision finding Renfroe guilty of the charge, but not imposing a penalty. There's 3 penalties cited in Article 10: censure, suspension, and removal from office. But they did make history. For the first time in the history of the NALC has a president been found guilty of an Article 10 charge. And the only reason why they had to vote him guilty, but mind you, 11 didn't. The evidence was overwhelming. You had the arrest report, you had the refusal to do the breathalyzer, you had a guilty plea, yet 11 of these people voted not guilty. The fact that it happened in 2018 and was concealed for almost 6 years demonstrates a consciousness of guilt. Yet, the council, 11 of them voted that he wasn't guilty.
Isn't that crazy? When I'm reading that, I know who some of them are. I know some of them are straight ass kissers. They were going to go. It didn't matter what he did.
On your show. You had one of them on your podcast.
Yeah.
He admitted.
I can name probably 5 of them right now. I'm not going to, but I guarantee you, I know some. Some are probably close to me or live close to me. But some weren't going to find him guilty of anything. It didn't matter what he came in there with. They were going to kiss that ass and weren't going to find him guilty. And like I said, they're going to circle the wagons. They definitely were not going to put the city letter carrier first. What was in the best interest of the city letter carrier? They were going to put what was the best interest of Brian Renfroe. Because when you think about it, a lot of people when this one came out were talking about, this happened all the way back in 2018. Why are they bringing it up now? Because they just found out about it. It wasn't like they found it happened in 2018. They had talked about it. He had brought it to President Orlando, and then we're just going to rehash this thing. We're going to bring it back up after all these years. The reason it was so important is because while looking at these charges, they found that. And then he lied about it and then had to come clean.
There's no statute of limitations when you actively conceal evidence that violates the NALC driving policy. See, the NALC has a policy that Renfroe signed off on, by the way, that you report tickets, accidents, any incidences along these lines to admin NALC. What else you have to consider here is that the argument that people want to make for this guy is an argument that says that he should benefit from his treachery. Imagine that.
Yeah.
Imagine if it wasn't a car that he was driving drunk, but it was something dealing with our treasury. We have millions of dollars invested. What happens if 3 or 4 million slips someplace else and they didn't discover it for 5 or 6 years? Well, that happened a long time ago. We're not going to worry about that. Is that the attitude you're going to have? What makes this any different?
Right.
It's the same treachery.
Well, that one there was, and I thought the penalty was absurd.
Well, there was no penalty. That ain't no penalty. What? You get a chauffeur
that we pay for.
you pay for his Uber, which is a legitimate expense.
And some people are like, at least we got him for something. At least we did something. Well, not really. I mean, you got us. You got the member. Yeah, we paid for that one.
Now, you've been an advocate, myself. You understand what rehabilitation's all about. You understand that most rehabilitation centers go by the 12-step process. And you understand that part of that process requires you to come clean and make amends and restitution if you can. It requires you to be honest about things. But almost on the heels of him coming out of the rehab facility, and they meet at the executive council and he's confronted with this, he initially denies the charge. He lied to everybody.
Right.
So, when you're just out of rehab and they teach you this 12-step process, that one of the predominant steps is coming clean, and you don't, what's that got to tell you? Doesn't that leave reasonable suspicion in a person's mind?
And you've done enough arbitrations, obviously. And I've talked about this before. Post-removal conduct. Arbitrators do take that in consideration. I mean, they will rule favorably on us or for us if your post-removal conduct is exemplary. If your post-removal conduct is, I was arrested again, or I've refused to go to the EAP, or I've refused to go to rehab, your post-removal conduct, they will rule unfavorably for us. You've probably seen that as well. But I've talked about this on post-removal conduct. His would be post-charge conduct. And he's still untruthful. I mean, he still lies about it. No, that never happened. Well, here's the evidence. Oh, yeah, it did happen. This is after he was supposed to have been sober. This was after his alleged sobriety. So I don't know. I mean, to me, if I'm on the executive council and I say, this is so many years old, he hid it from us. Nobody knew. It just came up. What do you say about it? It didn't happen. Well, then shit, you leave me no choice.
You
than to
know,
find you guilty of that. But hell, he's got his cronies and his puppets in there kissing his ass. They didn't care what he said, what he did.
what was uncovered by the Weir report that was unbeknownst to Chris when he filed the charge was that after Renfroe was arrested for drunk driving, you know, you get your license automatically revoked when he refused to take the breathalyzer test, right?
Right.
In every state and province in the US, it's almost SOP, including the District of Columbia. But he continued to drive NALC vehicles and rent cars on behalf of the NALC to conduct NALC business while he had a revoked license. So, you know, you talk about post-conduct, right?
Yeah.
If you go back and you look at the Weir report and the abuses towards female members of the NALC that occurred during this period of time, all of those incidents had to deal with him being drunk, him being on drinking alcohol, the assault on the women, the verbal abuse that he put on a branch president. All of this stuff happened after the drunk driving. This was a series, a pattern of events that wasn't picked up on. You know, there's a long time ago I learned, and one of the reasons why I quit drinking was that I learned there was a fine line between being a party animal and an old drunk.
Right. Right.
You know, there's a time and a place where you got to just take an assessment of yourself and change a lifestyle. In my personal view, Renfroe knew that he wasn't qualified because of his, and alcoholism is a credible disease.
Yeah.
That he knew he had this problem, and he didn't come forward and was honest with the membership about his problem, and he took a position that he couldn't do. He wasn't qualified for, both physically and mentally, because of his addiction to alcohol. So that's the true, right there, in my view, neglect of duty. Although, how do you charge somebody with that, right? But that has to resonate with somebody.
Yeah.
And you know, evidence like this, that's overwhelming, that's clear and convincing, you know, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that he was drunk driving an NALC vehicle, and you can't even give him a letter of warning. What the F? So even the panel of three recommended a censor. You know, they recommended a letter of warning. No letter carrier in this entire country, unless there's some gross procedural errors, is going to get off on a letter of warning for doing that. What makes him any different? Why does a national officer get a special status that no other letter carrier get? Aren't we all just letter carriers? Aren't we an association of letter carriers? Don't you have to be a letter carrier to be a national officer? So
you would think so.
Be treated any different than the people that you represent? That's this whole elitist mentality that goes on that needs to be corrected. That's why I'm really proud of people like you, Corey, that work so hard to correct it.
We're trying, brother. We're trying. All right. Now we got the last one, last appeal, and then I'm going to let you go to bed. So we got appeal decision of the Executive Council to the NALC 2024 National Convention delegates. The charging party hereby appeals the decision of the NALC Executive Board to overturn the guilty finding by the panel of three on charge 4-1A, filed by Director of City Delivery dated July 2023 against President Renfroe, abandoned position and dereliction, neglect of duty, which reads as follows. Charge 4, aka charge 1A, abandoned position and dereliction, neglect of duty. After President Renfroe's attendance was scheduled and announced, he failed to show at regions 1, 11, and 14, regional RAP sessions where the membership in these four regions were there waiting on him to arrive and speak. The attending branch officials sent by their members dues expected to be updated by the national president on the latest issues affecting letter carriers and report the same back to their membership. Renfroe's no-show, AWOL, harmed the union by causing a waste of time and resources. The negative optics of the local leaders who had to fill the void without advanced preparation to do so was a disappointment to the members present and further generated a negative impression on the NALC. Retired NBA Michael Weir was appointed as the investigator pursuant to NALC Constitution, Article 10, removal of officers. Investigator Weir conducted a thorough investigation, including interviews. The facts established in Investigator Weir's report. Renfroe was a no-show at Region 1's rap session scheduled April 1, 2024 in San Diego. Renfroe lied when he texted the host Branch 70 president, who was waiting for him at the airport, that he had missed his connecting flight. Investigation revealed that he never got on the first flight. The last-minute no-show left the NBA scrambling. Many were harmed as several branches had spent time and funds to hear the national president speak. Renfroe was a no-show at Region 11's rap session scheduled April 4 through 6, 2024 in Syracuse, New York. The NBA contacted Renfroe to get flight confirmation on April 4th. At 6:42 that day, Renfroe asked the hotel's location. Then sometime between 7 and 9 p.m., Renfroe texted he would not make it. Renfroe also texted a lie to the NBA that he was going to visit his sick father, but his own sister testified that he had not visited at that time. Who uses a father's illness to solicit sympathy when he was actually home drinking? Renfroe admitted he had alcohol addiction for years before he ran for the NALC president. A panel of 3 disinterested members, all retired national officers, was appointed by EVP Barner and held hearings. This charge was renumbered as Charge 4 and addressed this charge within 12 days of the hearings from December 12, 2023 and February 16th of 2024. The panel ruled in their March 25th, 2024 report and recommendations that Renfroe was guilty of this charge and recommended a formal written reprimand to be published in the Postal Record NALC Bulletin and on NALC.org website. On April 26, the NALC Executive Council completely threw out this charge and the panel's recommendation by a vote of 15 to 13. The facts are undisputed. President Renfroe was scheduled to attend 3 regional training sessions and went MIA. The panel made an error in judgment when it recommended to set aside the abandonment charge. There's no dispute that President Renfroe stopped showing up for work prior to him entering a rehabilitation facility. President Renfroe admitted he was home drinking and suffering from the effects of his alcoholism. There's no specific period that one can miss work before one can be lawfully charged with abandonment of his position. Since there's no dispute over the facts and circumstances of this charge and its neglect of duty, this is a penalty issue. Letter carriers are subject to discipline and discharge for failing to report as scheduled. The fact that the route got delivered anyway or the training session proceeded without him is irrelevant. Given the circumstances and out-of-pocket expenses incurred by branches and individual members sent to hear the president, they deserve equivalent reciprocity. Therefore, we ask that the delegates at the National Convention who are supreme to find President Renfroe support the panel of 3 guilty findings and find that President Renfroe is unfit to lead this great union. This appeal prays that the delegates do the right thing by voting to remove President Renfroe from his position.
You know, the panel of 3 found him guilty. And for life of me, I don't understand on something so clear-cut and so unambiguous that the executive board couldn't bring themselves to supporting the panel's guilty verdict. You know, as an example, talk about the impact that this had. Region 1 covers California. From top to bottom is over 750 miles. And we were at the bottom of California there in San Diego. So you had people traveling hundreds of miles to get there. You had people coming from Nevada, which is 400 miles from the California border, to San Diego. And then you had people coming in thousands of miles from Hawaii, over 2,500 miles, 5.5, 6 hours on the flight to get from Hawaii to California. Just to see President Renfroe, and all they got was a no-show and the lie to go with it. You know, personally, this is not the finding of anybody but my own, because I heard the testimony and I seen everything that went on. I just have a personal belief about this. And I really don't think it was the alcohol that kept President Renfroe from showing up in Region 1. I think that it had more to do with him trying to politically assassinate Brother Henry with salacious allegations and not wanting to face the consequences than him drinking. That's where the story broke. And it's peculiar that it broke right there at Region 1. Region 1 training is where, we first heard the rumors. I mean, they may have been circulating in other parts of the country, but that's where we became aware, and that's where Brother Henry became aware. And perhaps it was a guilty conscience that drove him to drink, knowing what he did, because this not only affected Brother Henry's reputation in the NALC, but it affected his home life and his family life. These types of allegations can cause great harm to you at home. What I can say for sure. Say again?
And on that, and sorry to interrupt you, but on that, and he had to know that shit was fixing to happen, because here's Henry saying, hey, meet with me on this, meet with me. So he knows that he's started some shit probably, and it went a little bit sideways and maybe spread a little bit more than he thought it would when he started. So yeah, I mean, when you say that, that's a good point. And that may have triggered something on that when he's spreading these rumors, and then, it's getting back all over the place. And here comes James Henry. Hey, we need to speak, brother, because you're letting, you said some things that we need to address. And then he keeps on and keeps on and said, hey, we got to talk. We need to speak, and he keeps putting that paper trail on his ass. I mean, Renfroe's smart enough to know what a paper trail is going to do. So, that is, I can buy that.
This all happened at the same time that Renfroe was claiming that, his alcoholism, his disease was at its peak, that was eating him up and that was debilitating him. And, there's a lot of reasons that I'm not a psychiatrist or anything, or a drug or alcohol counselor, but I've been around it long enough to know that there's reasons that people drink. And being drove to drink like that lots of times has to deal with a guilty conscience.
Yeah.
And when you play somebody that dirty, where you literally destroy their home environment over politics at work, that's just unconscionable. That's about the lowest gutter crawling thing that I could think of.
Me too.
And then you cowardly turn around and not talk to them. There was this movie on TV. It was a Western where the cavalry officer had his uniform jacket tore off of him, and they took this big yellow paint and drove it down his back, big yellow stripe. And that's what I think would be the appropriate penalty on this for not showing up, is a yellow stripe. But that's not in the Constitution. So
maybe we can vote on that.
Yeah. Tear his Union shirt off and give him a yellow stripe. But he deserves to be removed from office for all of these reasons. I mean, this is not the conduct. All these things put together, and there was more to these charges. Let's not forget, that Chris withdrew 2 of the charges, and the executive council decided 2 of the charges didn't merit going any further. But who posts on their social media app quote about the Ku Klux Klan? Who does that?
Well, especially you got to think about your position you're in. I mean, you're the president of the NALC. You just stay away from that. That's common sense. Even if it was harmless, whatever, you got to know. Don't be a knucklehead and entertain that. You just keep on scrolling past that. One of the biggest issues I had is everybody's all forgiving of this alcoholism. And like you said, we deal with that quite often in arbitration, and we'll feverishly and fervently defend that and protect those individuals. But that's really
Nobody
not the
walks
thing
away
here.
scot-free.
Exactly.
Nobody.
But everything that was done, he's blaming on alcoholism. So this guy is obviously a 24 at the time, a 24/7 drunk, because everything is excused away in alcoholism. All the executive council are excusing all these things away on alcoholism, but nobody knew he was an alcoholic. It doesn't make any
Well,
sense.
I do know that some of the very people who voted against the charges were enablers of Renfroe's alcoholism.
Well, they should be
Enabled him
brought up on charges themselves.
to get away with it.
They should be brought up on charges themselves. Because
There's
if
a
you're
lot
going to
of
say you're going to excuse it away as alcoholism, nobody knew as an alcoholic. Was he that good? It was, is he a working alcoholic? He's had a DUI. Nobody knew about that. He had his license revoked. Nobody knew about that. All of these things he did were due to alcoholism. Nobody knew about that. He wasn't showing up to places because he was drinking. Nobody knew about that. Is that what they're
well,
telling us? Are they that blind, or was he just that good?
they people knew about his alcoholism. They
Well, then
just
they
didn't
need to
talk
have
about
their asses brought up on Article 10 charges as well. I'd love
it.
for
He told President Rolando back in 2018 when Fred first asked him about this that he was in counseling, he was in treatment. So, people saying he should be given a second chance. Well, his own testimony said that he was getting treatment back in 2018. Then when he gets the drunk driving, he has to go through a diversion program. That's a treatment program.
mm-hmm.
So he had a second chance and a third chance, and now it's a fourth chance. Is there going to be a fifth chance? At what critical moment?
Well, this executive council will give him that. You got so many cowards on that executive council. I mean, they basically, the next president should be rejoicing if they're, have no integrity, because you're not going to get me on anything. You just given every president in history a get out of jail free card, because if none of these stuck, you're not going to get me on anything.
Well, the old thing about rape, pillage, and burn, he came pretty close to all of that.
Yeah.
The sexual assaults and stuff against the women, that wasn't part of the charges, but that was uncovered when Mr. Weir was doing his investigation. He just reported on where his investigation took him. And that's what an investigator does. Even in a court of law, when the investigator's findings are relevant, and they just disregarded half of his findings. This wasn't a good person. This was somebody with deep character flaws that deceived a lot of people. Well, and it's continuing today.
With that executive council, all I can say is I hope it was worth it, protecting that piece of shit. And I know you don't want to get into it, but with the CLC, they're gonna make changes on that executive council. So I hope that it was worth it protecting him. He can do nothing for you. He can't help you save your job. Matter of fact, he's going to lose his. If it's not on this at the convention, it'll be on the next election. And so those that were in bed with him during these charges, y'all are going to lose your position too. And I couldn't be more ecstatic to know that I'm going to be a part of that.
Well,
because it's low down, common, sorry cowardice. And that's the reason this union is in the shape it's in right now, is because you got too many cowards on that executive council that are in bed with this sorry ass and protected him, and they're all going to lose their positions because of it. So I hope it was worth it.
Well, I'll say this about the CLC. It was founded exclusively for our campaign against President Renfroe and his enablers that follow him. We are coming for you.
Yes.
And be prepared. The CLC has made some significant progress since we started up basically in March of this year. We're filling out our infrastructure. We will be making an announcement shortly that we just have appointed a director of social media programs. We're going to have be appointing regional fundraisers shortly, regional organizers to help get the vote out in 2026. And we're going to have an education department where members with questions about concerning grievances, because actually I've been spending a lot of time, I've been getting questions through our CLC webpage about grievances. So I want to explain to people the primary purpose of the CLC is to fund and support candidates who are running against the Renfroe administration. We're not able to go into your station and file a grievance. I'm sorry, but even if we did do that, it would be procedurally defective because we're not authorized to be there. And I very seriously doubt whether the national headquarters would sign a TA for us to go into your office. But what we are
that's a good bet.
What we are committed to doing, though, in all seriousness, is providing the very best people we can find and vetting them and running them for office to make changes in this union. This union has so much potential, and the potential it has is with the people that are in the union. We have a lot of people at the local level who are very dedicated to take this job very seriously and do fantastic work, and I congratulate you for that, no matter where you stand in this thing, because your heart is where it's supposed to be, working for the benefit of your members. There are far more good people in this union than people that aren't doing their job. So that's why I invested 45 years in this. That's my interest. I have a lifetime invested in this union. And one of the last things that I want to do as part of this union is to make sure that we get back on the track where we were when we first walked in the door. You know, Vince Sombrado, we didn't have the internet back in those days. And he had an 800 line that he gave updates, sometimes daily, sometimes weekly, about what went on with contract negotiations. I mean, he didn't talk about strategy and tactics and stuff, but he let us know that he was in there fighting for us. He told it. I mean, I remember when he was enraged by the Postal Service comparing us to paper boys. You know, I remember in 1981, Vince had his prime. He was ready to go. He was going to take us out on strike again over if the Postal Service went to a two-tier pay system. And now we ratify contracts with two-tier pay systems. How far have we fallen?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we can be what we were before. And there's a lot of people that aren't affiliated with the CLC but are pushing us in the same direction. The young man out there in Minnesota, Mr. Vassar out there, he's doing a hell of a job in organizing people. And you have people such as yourself and the Angry Mailman and Fed Up and several other people out there. And I'm sorry if I didn't mention your name. I'm not very technically astute, so I don't have all of this down, but I will. But you guys are telling it like it is, and you're keeping the membership.
Classes of Mail is one. I think Classes of Mail.
Classes of Mail, yes. So, and if I left you out there, I'm sorry. I didn't intend to slight you. I just don't know you, and I hope you're at the convention and we get an opportunity to meet, because you can't miss me. So I'm anxious to get to the convention and be with my brothers and sisters there and see if we can't put the union on the right track. Please support our efforts to have these appeals heard. Those people who have signed up with CLC, we have a box there that you can go to our webpage, concernedlettercarriers.com, and put your name down as a supporter who wants more information. Let us know if you're a convention delegate, and we'll send blast facts to you at the convention explaining our position on a matter and why we're voting in the direction that we're voting. There is some issues out there that I know that we're all going to have to take a stand on. One of them is open bargaining. I got to tell you, that's nothing to be scared of. That's just the way we were in the 1980s. The 1990s under Vince. I mean, they're not new. They're classic Union. I mean, just like classic rock. It's not new. It's been there for a long time. These guys they understand what we were at one time. And there's nothing wrong with going back there. So there's other folks out there pushing in the same direction, and I congratulate them and I wish them all the success in the world. And I want to thank you very much, Corey, not only for having me on, but doing what you do and truly getting to know you. I honestly believe that you do love everybody, and I thank you for that. And in the house that I grew up in, the word was important to us, and you certainly act the part. So thank you for that.
Absolutely, my brother. Well, Charlie, that's it for tonight, my man. I appreciate your friendship. You know, I'm glad that you reached out to me. You're a special individual, and I was immediately attracted to that passion you had for the city letter carriers, and that was on your heart from the second you called me. I could tell that you were hurting for the city letter carrier in the direction we were going. You said, "Hey, we've got to make a change." I said, "What do you need from me?" What do you need me to do? Matter of fact, every time we talk, I ask, "What do you need me to do?"
You
Because
do, you do.
I'm sold. I'm sold. I've bought in, and as I can see it from the people that contact me, that reach out to me, that we are hurting in a bad way, and I've never seen it this bad before in my tenure here as the shop steward from 2006 to advocate 2012. It's never been this bad, and it's disheartening. But I appreciate your passion for the city letter carrier, and to this day, still doing arbitrations and trying to protect our people, and that's what it's all about. So I love
I
you, my
want
brother.
to thank you, and one last shout out to all the shop stewards out there that put so much effort into things
Right.
and the grievance work. If it wasn't for you guys, we wouldn't be successful in arbitration. And all you branch officers out there that live on caffeine and put in, 10, 12, 18-hour days, day after day, putting fires out. I understand where you're at, and I appreciate what you do, because we've done the same thing ourselves. So hang in there. We're not going to disappoint you. I promise you, we're not going to disappoint you. We will do what our mission statement says we will do. Thank you, Corey.
All right, brother. You have a good night, Charlie. I'll talk to you later, my friend.
Take care, brother.
Thank you, brother. Bye.